in the shadowed heart of London's fog. A cryptic letter summons Hercule Poirot to a dangerous game, a whispered challenge from the enigmatic keeper of secrets. Who is this elusive figure, and why is a diplomat's life hanging by a thread? From the opulent Orient Express to Istanbul's labyrinthine bazaars, from Parisian galleries hiding deadly secrets to a snowbound alpine lodge, Poirot unravels a conspiracy threatening Europe's fragile peace. Each clue pulls him deeper into a web of betrayal, coded messages, and a mastermind known only as the Raven. Will Poirot's little gray cells triumph, or will the Raven's shadow plunge nations into chaos? Dive into Hercule Poirot's Covert chase, where every step sparks suspense, and every answer breeds a new question. Chapter 1: The Whispered Invitation. The rain fell in a relentless curtain over London, cloaking the city in a silvery mist that blurred the edges of gaslit streets. Hercule Poirot, ensconced in his impeccably tidy flat at Whitehaven Mansions, sat by the fire, a delicate porcelain cup of steaming tisane cradled in his hands. The warmth of the drink contrasted with the chill seeping through the window panes, where droplets raced in chaotic patterns. His mustache, meticulously groomed, twitched slightly as he studied the letter before him, a single sheet of heavy vellum, its edges faintly embossed with a pattern of interlocking keys. The letter had arrived that morning, slipped beneath his door by an unseen hand. Its contents were as intriguing as they were cryptic. Monsieur Poirot, your reputation for unraveling the impossible precedes you. If you seek a challenge worthy of your little gray cells, come to the Black Anchor Tavern at Wapping Docks, midnight tonight. Trust no one, and speak only to the keeper of secrets. A matter of grave consequence awaits. The keeper Poirot's green eyes, sharp as polished jade, narrowed as he reread the words. The signature was an enigma, the tone urgent, yet deliberately vague. He disliked vagueness, it offended his sense of order, but the promise of a puzzle, one that dared to summon him, was irresistible. He tapped a manicured finger against the armrest of his chair, the rhythm steady as a metronome. A matter of grave consequence, he murmured, his Belgian accent softening the edges of the English words. A bean, we shall see. The clock on the mantel struck 10, its chime a gentle reminder of the hour's approach. Poirot rose, adjusting his cravat with precision, and donned his heavy overcoat, its woolen folds as immaculate as his reputation. He selected a silver-handled cane, not for necessity, but for elegance, and stepped into the rain-soaked night. Wapping Docks was a world apart from the polished streets of Mayfair. The air here was thick with attempts of salt and tar, mingled with the faint sourness of river mud. Warehouses loomed like silent sentinels, their windows dark and uninviting. The Black Anchor Tavern crouched at the end of a cobbled alley, its sign creaking in the wind, depicting a rusted anchor entwined with seaweed. The glow of oil lamps spilled from its grimy windows, casting fleeting shadows on the slick stones. Poirot paused at the alley's mouth, his senses alert. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the fog was thicker now, curling like smoke around the gaslights. A docker in a tattered cap shuffled past, his eyes averted, and Poirot noted the man's hurried gait, fearful, perhaps, of more than the weather. The detective's instincts, honed by years of unraveling human motives, whispered of danger. Yet, danger was the spice of his profession. He pushed open the tavern door, and a wave of warmth, smoke, and raucous laughter greeted him. The interior was a study in contrasts. Rough-hewn tables crowded with sailors and dockworkers, their voices a cacophony of dialects, while a polished mahogany bar gleamed under the watchful eye of a barmaid with a scar across her cheek. Poirot, ever the anomaly in his tailored suit and polished shoes, drew curious glances, but no overt hostility. He moved with the confidence of a man who knew his place in the world. Even in a den such as this, at a corner table, half hidden by a sagging curtain, sat a figure cloaked in a hooded oilskin coat. The hood obscured their face, but the glint of a silver ring on their hand caught the lamplight. Poirot's pulse quickened. This, surely, was the keeper of secrets. He approached, his cane tapping lightly on the warped floorboards, and slid into the chair opposite Bonsoir. He said, his voice calm but firm. "You are, perhaps, the one who summoned Hercule Poirot." The figure did not lift their hood, but a low, measured voice, neither distinctly male nor female, replied, "You are punctual, Monsieur Poirot. A rare quality." A gloved hand slid a folded piece of parchment across the table, its edges sealed with black wax. "This is for you. Read it, but not here. And trust no one, not even those you call friends." Poirot's fingers closed around the parchment, his expression unreadable. "And why, mon ami, should I trust you?" The figure leaned closer, and Poirot caught a faint scent of sandalwood and something sharper, like gunpowder. "Because," they whispered, "the life of a man who shapes nations hangs in the balance. If you fail, his blood will stain your conscience." Before Poirot could respond, a commotion erupted at the bar. A burly sailor, his face flushed with ale, had overturned a table, shouting accusations of cheating at cards. Glasses shattered, and the crowd surged, some to intervene, others to join the fray. In the chaos, the hooded figure slipped from the table and melted into the throng, leaving only the echo of their words. Poirot tucked the parchment into his coat, his mind racing. The tavern was no place to linger, not with the air thick with suspicion and the eyes of strangers lingering too long on his foreign attire. He rose, weaving through the brawl with the grace of a dancer, and stepped back into the fog. Outside, the alley was silent, save for the drip of water from overhanging eaves. Poirot's breath misted in the cold as he broke the wax seal and unfolded the parchment. The message was written in a precise hand, but the words were gibberish, a jumble of letters and numbers. K7 M9 P4 ZQ 8R2 L3 N6 T1 beneath it. A single line: "Find the cipher's heart at the Iron Duke's shadow. Dawn tomorrow." A code. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Codes were the language of secrets, and he spoke it fluently. But the mention of the Iron Duke, likely a reference to the Duke of Wellington, whose statue stood in Hyde Park's, suggested a specific location. The shadow at dawn implied a precise time and place, where the statue's silhouette would point to a clue. He glanced at his pocket watch. 1:15 a.m. Dawn was hours away, but the puzzle demanded preparation. As he turned to leave, a soft scrape of boots on cobblestones froze him in place. He spun, cane raised, to find his shadow detaching itself from the Walla man. Lean and wiry, with a scarf pulled high over his face, the glint of a knife flashed in the dim light. "Monsieur," Poirot said, his voice steady, "if you seek my wallet, you will be disappointed. I carry little cash." The man's eyes, visible above the scarf, were cold and calculating. "Not your money, detective. Your life, if you don't drop that paper." Poirot's mind worked swiftly. The parchment was clearly valuable, and this thug was no common cutthroat. His knowledge of Poirot's identity suggested a deeper connection to the keeper. With a deliberate movement, Poirot lowered his cane, but his other hand slipped into his coat, fingers closing around a small silver whistle. "Allure," he said. "Let us discuss this like gentlemen." In one fluid motion, he blew the whistle, its shrill note piercing the fog. The thug hesitated, startled, and Poirot seized the moment, darting past him toward the main street. Shouts echoed behind him, but the fog swallowed his pursuer as he reached the glow of a gaslit thoroughfare. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot locked the door and drew the curtains before spreading the parchment on his desk. The fire had dwindled to embers, but his focus burned bright. The code K7M9P for Z. Q8R. 2 Elitres Any Seistion was unlike any he had encountered. A substitution cipher, perhaps, or a Polybius square. He retrieved a notebook and began testing patterns, his pencil moving with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Hours passed, the clock ticking toward dawn. At last, a breakthrough. The code was a variant of a Vigenère cipher, with the key hidden in the phrase, "Keeper of Secrets." Decoded, it revealed a chilling message. "Diplomat, marked for death. Iron Duke's shadow hides the key to his fate. Trust no one." Poirot leaned back, his mind ablaze. A diplomat's life was at stake, and the Iron Duke's shadow was his only lead. He glanced at the window, where the first gray light of dawn crept through the curtains. There was no time to waste. Hyde Park at dawn was a study in stillness, the mist clinging to the grass like a lover's embrace. The statue of the Iron Duke loomed ahead, its bronze form stern and unyielding. Poirot, dressed in a discreet gray coat to blend with the morning, studied the statue's shadow, which stretched eastward across the dew-soaked ground. At its tip, near a gnarled oak, he spotted a disturbance in the earth-freshly turned soil, barely noticeable. Kneeling, he brushed away the dirt to reveal a small tin box, its lid engraved with the same interlocking key pattern as the letter. Inside was a brass key and a folded note. Platform 3, King's Cross. 8 a.m. The train to destiny awaits. Poirot pocketed the key and note, his heart quickening. The puzzle was unfolding, each piece slotting into place, but the stakes were higher than ever. A diplomat's life, a shadowy conspiracy, and a train to an unknown destination. His little gray cells were fully engaged. As he left the park, the rising sun burned away the fog, and Poirot felt a surge of resolve. The keeper of secrets had set him on a path, and he would follow it to its end, wherever it led. For now, he had a train to catch. The chapter closed with Poirot striding toward King's Cross, the brass key heavy in his pocket, and the promise of answers driving him forward. The mystery had begun, and Hercule Poirot was ready to unravel it. Chapter 2. Shadows on the Orient Express. The platform at Victoria Station was a swirling tableau of steam and farewells, the air thick with the scent of coal and anticipation. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal overcoat and a neatly pressed suit, stood beneath the great iron clock, his polished shoes gleaming under the gaslights. His mustache, meticulously waxed, twitched as he surveyed the bustling crowd. In his gloved hand, he clutched a single ticket for the Orient Express, its destination Calais, to Istanbul, in elegant script. The cryptic message from the dockside tavern, now tucked securely in his breast pocket, had led him here, to this grand train where secrets he suspected traveled as freely as the passengers. The whistle shrilled, and Poirot stepped aboard, his sharp gray eyes scanning the opulent carriage. The Orient Express was a marvel of polished mahogany and gleaming brass, its corridors lined with plush carpets and velvet drapes. Attendants in crisp uniforms glided past, offering champagne flutes to passengers who laughed with the careless ease of wealth. Yet beneath the glamour, Poirot sensed an undercurrent of unease, as if the train itself were a stage for a drama yet to unfold. He settled into his private compartment, a cozy enclave of damask cushions and a small rosewood table. The coded message from the keeper of secrets lay before him, its words a riddle solved but not yet understood. Seek the one who watches from the east. The rendezvous point in Istanbul was clear, but the identity of this watcher remained a tantalizing mystery. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the table, his mind already turning over the possibilities. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "The game, it begins." The train lurched forward, and Poirot rose, adjusting his tie in the compartment's small mirror. To uncover the watcher, he would need to observe, to listen, to weave himself into the fabric of the train's transient society. He stepped into the corridor, the clink of crystal and murmur of conversation guiding him toward the dining car. The dining car was a symphony of elegance, its tables draped in starched linen and adorned with silver candelabras. Passengers dined on pheasant and caviar, their laughter mingling with the clatter of fine china. Poirot's gaze swept the room, cataloging faces: a silver-haired diplomat with a nervous tic, a young heiress fanning herself with a peacock feather, a broad-shouldered man in a tweed suit who seemed more interested in his newspaper than his meal. At a corner table, a woman in a claret velvet gown caught his eye. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her posture was regal, yet her fingers toyed with a pearl necklace in a way that suggested unease. A countess, perhaps, Poirot mused, noting her title from the passenger manifest he'd glimpsed at boarding. Countess Irina Volskaya. He took a seat near the center, where he could observe without being conspicuous. An attendant approached, offering a menu, but Poirot waved it away with a polite smile. a tisane civu plot, and perhaps a small plate of madeleines. As the attendant departed, Poirot's attention shifted to a man across the aisle, a wiry figure with some skin and a neatly trimmed beard. His tweed jacket and scuffed boots suggested a life spent in rugged pursuits, yet his eyes sparkled with an intellectual curiosity. The man was reading a leather-bound journal, occasionally scribbling notes with a fountain pen. Poirot recognized him from the manifest as Dr. Julian Harrow, an archaeologist of some repute. The meal progressed, and Poirot's instincts sharpened. He noticed a waiter lingered too long at the Countess's table, his hands fumbling as he refilled her wine. A moment later, a young man in a tailored suit, likely a secretary, given his deferential demeanor, approached the diplomat's table, passing a folded note. The diplomat's tick intensified as he read it, his eyes darting toward the carriage door. Poirot's mustache twitched. Something is afoot. As the attendant returned with his tisane, Poirot caught a glimpse of a telegram slipping from the young secretary's pocket as he brushed past. It fluttered to the floor, unnoticed by its owner. Poirot rose smoothly, retrieving it under the guise of adjusting his napkin. The telegram was brief but telling. Istanbul, midnight, Blue Mosque, watcher awaits. His pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. The telegram confirmed the rendezvous from the coded message. But who was the sender? And why had it been so carelessly dropped? Before he could ponder further, a commotion erupted. At the far end of the car, a woman's voice, sharp and indignant, cut through the din. My jewels, they've been tampered with. It was the heiress, her peacock fan now discarded, as she stood, clutching a velvet pouch. The dining car fell, silent, all eyes on her. The head steward hurried over, his face a mask of professional concern. Madame, please, what has happened? My sapphire brooch's gone, she cried, her voice trembling with fury. I left it in my compartment, and now the lock on my case is broken. Poirot's mind raced. A theft on the Orient Express was no small matter, and the timing felt suspiciously convenient. Was it a distraction, a test? He slipped the telegram into his pocket and approached the heiress, his demeanor calm but authoritative. Madame, if I may, he said, bowing slightly. I am Hercule Poirot, a detective of some experience. Perhaps I might assist. The heiress, Miss Clara Beaumont, eyed him warily but nodded. If you can find my brooch, monsieur, I'd be most grateful. Poirot followed her to her compartment, accompanied by the steward and Dr. Harrow, who had risen from his table with a curious glint in his eye. I've seen my share of mischief in the field, Harrow said, falling into step beside Poirot. Mind if I tag along? I'm rather good at spotting what doesn't belong. Poirot inclined his head, intrigued by the archaeologist's offer. Very well, Monsieur Harrow. Let us see what secrets this compartment holds. Miss Beaumont's compartment was a study in opulence, its walls adorned with silk panels and a small chandelier casting a soft glow. Her traveling case, a leather-backed beauty, bore clear signs of tampering. The lock was scratched, and the clasp hung loose. Poirot knelt, examining the damage with a magnifying glass from his pocket. The scratches are fresh, he murmured, made with a crude tool, not a key. This was no professional thief. He opened the case, revealing a jumble of silks and perfumes. The velvet pouch lay atop the pile, its drawstring loosened. Poirot sifted through the contents, his fingers pausing on a small tear in the lining. Curio, he said softly, probing the tear. His fingers brushed something harder, tiny brass key, no larger than a matchstick, hidden in the stitching. What's that? Harrow asked, leaning closer. Poirot held up the key, its surface etched with a faint symbol, a crescent moon. This, monsieur, does not belong to a sapphire brooch. It is something else entirely. He turned to Miss Beaumont. Madame, was this key yours? She shook her head, her eyes wide. No, I've never seen it. My brooch was in that pouch. I swear it. Poirot's mind whirred. The key was a plant, he was certain, meant to be found, but by whom, and why? He pocketed the key, his expression unreadable. Fear not, madame, your brooch may yet be recovered. but I suspect this incident is part of a larger game. The steward, visibly anxious, promised a thorough search of the train. Poirot, however, had other plans. He returned to the dining car, Harrow at his side, and resumed his observation. The Countess was now absent, her table cleared, and the diplomat was engrossed in conversation with the secretary. Poirot's gaze lingered on the waiter, who had lingered too long at the Countess's table. The man was now polishing glasses at the bar, his movements too precise, too deliberate. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said quietly, "you are a man of the world. Tell me, have you encountered a symbol like this crescent moon in your travels?" Harrow's brow furrowed. A crescent moon. Common enough in Ottoman artifacts, often tied to secrecy or guardianship. Could be a marker for a society or a code. Where did you find it? Poirot smiled faintly. In a place it was not meant to be. Come, let us take a walk. They strolled through the train, passing compartments where passengers dozed or read. Poirot's senses were on high alert, noting every detail. A porter's hurried glance, a curtain drawn too quickly. At the end of the carriage, they reached the luggage car, a dimly lit space stacked with trunks and crates. Poirot's eyes fell on a small leather satchel tucked behind a larger case, its lock bearing the same crescent moon symbol. "Voila," he whispered, kneeling to examine it. The satchel was locked, but the key from Miss Beaumont's pouch fit perfectly. Inside was a single item, a folded letter, sealed with red wax. Poirot broke the seal, revealing a list of names, none familiar, but one marked with an asterisk. Countess Irina Volskaya. Harrow whistled softly. A passenger list with a twist. What's the Countess got to do with this? That, mon ami, is what we must discover, Poirot replied, tucking the letter away. But first, we must ensure this satchel is not missed. They replaced the satchel and returned to the dining car, where the atmosphere had shifted. The heiress was seated again, her composure restored, and the Countess had returned, her expression serene but her eyes watchful. Poirot excused himself from Harrow and approached her table, bowing slightly. "Countess Volskaya, I am Hercule Poirot. Might I have a word?" Her smile was cool, her accent faintly Russian. "Of course, monsieur. What brings you to my table?" "A matter of curiosity," Poirot said, his tone light. "I understand you are traveling to Istanbul. Might I inquire about your plans there?" Her fingers tightened on her wineglass, a fleeting gesture. "A holiday, nothing more. The mosques, they are quite enchanting." "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving hers. "And yet, one hears whispers of other enchantments in Istanbul's secrets, perhaps, that travel on trains like this one." Her laughter was musical but guarded. "You speak in riddles, monsieur. I am but a simple traveler." Poirot inclined his head, retreating with a polite smile. Her deflection was skillful, but her unease confirmed his suspicions. The Countess was no mere tourist. As night fell, the train plunged through the French countryside, its rhythm a hypnotic lullaby. Poirot returned to his compartment, the letter and key burning in his pocket. He spread the letter on his table, studying the names. The asterisk beside the Countess's name suggested she was either a target or a player in this conspiracy. The telegram, the key, the satchel all were pieces of a puzzle. But the picture remained incomplete. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Harrow stood at the door, his expression grim. "Poirot, you'd better come. There's trouble in the luggage car." Poirot followed him, his heart quickening. The luggage car was in disarray, trunks overturned and crates splintered. The satchel was gone. In its place was a single playing card, an ace of spades, pinned to the wall with a knife. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A message," he said, "and not a subtle one." Harrow scanned the wreckage. Someone knew we were here. That satchel was important. We agreed, and its absence tells us as much as its contents. We are being watched, Monsieur Harrow, and the watcher is closer than we think. They returned to the dining car, where the passengers were now dispersing to their compartments. Poirot's gaze lingered on the waiter, who was clearing tables with an almost theatrical calm. "Monsieur Harrow," he said softly, "I believe Our next move is to watch the Watcher, but we must be discreet." Over the next day, Poirot and Harrow formed an uneasy alliance. Their conversations, a blend of guarded trust and mutual curiosity. Harrow shared tales of his excavations in Anatolia, hinting at his knowledge of secret societies that used symbols like the crescent moon. Poirot, in turn, revealed just enough of his suspicions to keep Harrow engaged, sensing the archaeologist's skills could prove invaluable in Istanbul. On the second night, as the train neared the Austrian border, Poirot orchestrated a plan. He staged a loud conversation with Harrow in the dining car, mentioning the satchel and its contents within earshot of the waiter. As expected, the waiter excused himself shortly after, slipping into the corridor. Poirot followed at a distance, Harrow trailing behind. The waiter entered a service compartment, where Poirot overheard a whispered exchange. "The satchel's gone," the waiter hissed. "He's got the list," a second voice, low and accented, replied. Then we moved to Plan B, Istanbul. Midnight. No mistakes. Poirot retreated before he was spotted, his mind racing. The waiter was a pawn, but the second voice, likely the Countess or her agent, confirmed the rendezvous. The ace of spades was a warning, but Poirot was undeterred. He had the list, the key, and now a clearer sense of the players. The next morning, as the train rolled into Budapest, Poirot confronted Miss Beaumont with the recovered brooch, which had been found by the steward in a porter's locker. Her gratitude was effusive, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. He handed Harrow a slip of paper with the memorized names from the satchel. "These are our leads, mon ami. In Istanbul, we will find the Watcher, and perhaps the truth." Harrow grinned, tucking the paper away. "You're a sly one, Poirot. I'm in." As the Orient Express thundered toward Istanbul, Poirot sipped his Tizan, his mind alight with possibilities. The Countess, the waiter, the diplomat, the telegram were threads in a tapestry of intrigue. The crescent moon key rested in his pocket, a small but potent symbol of the secrets he would soon unravel. The chase was on, and Hercule Poirot was ready for the next act. Chapter 3. The Bazaar of Hidden Truths. The air in Istanbul's Grand Bazaar was thick with the scent of saffron and roasted chestnuts, a heady blend that swirled through the labyrinthine alleys like a living thing. Hercule Poirot adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat, his sharp gray eyes scanning the kaleidoscope of merchants, shoppers, and flickering oil lamps. The bazaar was a riot of color and sound silk scarves, fluttering like exotic birds, the clink of copper coffee pots, and the rhythmic haggling that rose and fell like a distant tide. Beside him, Dr. Evelyn Hartley, the archaeologist who had become his unlikely ally on the Orient Express, clutched her leather satchel, her expression a mix of excitement and unease. "It's like stepping into a storybook, Monsieur Poirot," Evelyn murmured, her voice barely audible over the chatter of a nearby spice vendor. "But I can't shake the feeling we're being watched." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile curling beneath it. "My dear Dr. Hartley, in a place such as this, one is always watched. The trick is to discern which eyes hold malice, and which merely curiosity." Their journey to this moment had begun with a cryptic lead from the Orient Express, a telegram hinting at a rendezvous in the bazaar, tied to a shadowy plot to steal a diplomatic treaty. The coded message Poirot had received in London, signed by the enigmatic keeper of secrets, had led them here, to this pulsing heart of commerce and secrets. The treaty, he suspected, was no mere document, but a linchpin in a delicate balance of European alliances, its theft a spark that could ignite chaos. Yet the details remained elusive, hidden behind veils of deception. They moved deeper into the bazaar, Poirot's polished shoes clicking softly on the worn cobblestones. Evelyn, with her practical boots and khaki jacket, seemed more at home among the relics of ancient civilizations than in this modern maze of trade. Yet her keen intellect had already proven invaluable, her knowledge of obscure languages aiding Poirot in deciphering the telegram's cryptic reference to the singer's verse. "Look there," Evelyn said, pointing to a narrow alley where a street performer strummed a saz, its mournful notes weaving through the crowd. The man, clad in a tattered robe, sang in a low, haunting voice, his lyrics in Turkish but laced with an odd cadence that caught Poirot's ear. "Listen closely, Dr. Hartley," Poirot whispered, pausing to blend into the crowd. "The words are not mere poetry, they are a map." Evelyn frowned, straining to hear. The performer's song spoke of a weaver's loom and a shadowed door beneath the stars. Poirot's mind raced, parsing the metaphor. A weaver's loom suggested textiles, a common trade in the bazaar. But the shadowed door hinted at something concealed, perhaps a hidden entrance. He scanned the alley, noting a stall draped in rich tapestries. Its vendor, an elderly woman with eyes like polished obsidian, watching them intently. "Come," Poirot said, guiding Evelyn toward the stall. The vendor's gaze never wavered. As they approached, her hands deftly folding a crimson rug, Madame Poirot began in flawless Turkish, his tone courteous, yet probing. "Your tapestries are exquisite. Do you, perhaps, know of a weaver whose work is done beneath the stars?" The woman's lips parted in a thin smile, revealing a glint of gold in her teeth. "You seek more than rugs, Effendi," she replied, her voice low and raspy. "The stars hide many secrets, but only for those who know the song." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And if I know the verse?" She studied him, then gestured to a curtain at the back of her stall. "Follow the thread," she said cryptically, returning to her rugs as if they had never spoken. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. That was theatrical. "Life, Dr. Hartley, is often a performance," Poirot said, leading her behind the curtain. Beyond it lay a narrow passage, its walls lined with faded tiles depicting celestial patterned stars and crescents in swirling blues and golds. The air grew cooler, the din of the bazaar muffled as they descended a short flight of stone steps. At the bottom, a heavy wooden door, its surface carved with a constellation, stood ajar. Poirot pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. The room was small, its walls draped in black velvet, and at its center stood a table holding a single object, a brass astrolabe, its intricate dials gleaming under a hanging lamp. Two men sat in the shadows, their voices hushed but urgent. Poirot signaled Evelyn to stay silent, and they pressed against the wall, listening. "The treaty must be secured before the summit," one man said, his accent clipped and Germanic. "The Raven will not tolerate failure." "The diplomat is guarded," the other replied, his voice smoother, possibly French. "But the distraction is in place. The bazaar will be chaos tomorrow." Poirot's heart quickened. The Ravana name he had not yet encountered, but which carried the weight of authority. The treaty, it seemed, was the prize in a game of international stakes, and these men were pawns in a larger scheme. He leaned closer, straining to hear more, when a floorboard creaked under Evelyn's boot. The men fell silent. A chair scraped, and footsteps approached. Poirot acted swiftly, pulling Evelyn behind a velvet drape, just as the door swung open. A figure peered into the passage, his silhouette tall and angular, a knife glinting in his hand. Poirot held his breath, his hand resting lightly on the silver-topped cane that concealed a slender blade. The figure hesitated, then retreated, muttering something about stray cats. "We must act quickly," Poirot whispered, leading Evelyn back to the chamber. The men had vanished, leaving the astrolabe behind. Poirot examined it, noting a series of numbers etched into its rim coordinates, perhaps, or a code. He pocketed a small parchment tucked beneath it, which bore a fragment of the treaty, its wax seal broken but intact. "We have what we came for," he said, "but we are not alone." As if on cue, shouts erupted from the passage. Three masked figures burst into the room, their blades drawn. Poirot's cane flashed, parrying a thrust with surprising agility for a man of his stature. Evelyn, no stranger to danger, swung her satchel, catching one attacker in the jaw. The third lunged at Poirot, but he sidestepped, tripping the man with a deft flick of his cane. The attackers scrambled to their feet, but the sound of approaching footsteps, bazaar guards sent them fleeing into the shadows. Poirot and Evelyn slipped back into the bazaar, blending into the crowd. As the chaos subsided, the parchment, safely tucked in Poirot's waistcoat, was a small victory, but its contents a partial draft of the treaty raised more questions than answers. The mention of the raven lingered in Poirot's mind, a specter of a mastermind, orchestrating this web of deceit. "We're alive, and we have a piece of the puzzle," Evelyn said, catching her breath. "But what now?" Poirot's eyes sparkled with determination. "Now, Dr. Hartley, we follow the stars to the next act of this drama. The treaty's secrets will not remain hidden for long." The bazaar pulsed around them, a living tapestry of secrets and schemes. But Poirot's mind was already elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond Istanbul's vibrant alleys. Chapter 4. The Diplomat's Masquerade. The air in Istanbul was thick with the scent of jasmine and anticipation as Hercule Poirot stepped from the hired car onto the cobblestone drive of the Yildiz Palace. The grand edifice, a relic of Ottoman splendor, loomed under the starlit sky, its golden domes catching the flicker of torches lining the entrance. Tonight, it hosted a masked ball, a glittering affair attended by diplomats, aristocrats, and shadowy figures cloaked in secrecy. Poirot adjusted the sleek Venetian mask black with silver filigree that concealed half his face, its elegance complementing his impeccably tailored tuxedo. His mustache, meticulously waxed, twitched with the thrill of the chase. The coded message from the Grand Bazaar, tucked safely in his pocket, had led him here, to this den of intrigue, where the diplomat under threat, Ambassador Philippe Renaud, mingled among the revelers. Poirot's eyes, sharp behind the mask, scanned the crowd as he entered the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a kaleidoscope of light across gilded walls, where frescoes of sultans and their courts watched over the swirling dancers. The orchestra played a waltz, its notes weaving through the murmur of multilingual conversations, English, Turkish, and the occasional guttural whisper of German. Guests in elaborate costumes glided past, a peacock in emerald feathers, a jester with jingling bells, a figure in a crimson cloak resembling a Renaissance prince. Poirot's task was clear yet daunting. Identify the diplomat, uncover the threat, and decipher the locket's inscription mentioned in the coded messenger. Clue to the next step in this labyrinthian conspiracy. He moved with purpose, his steps light but deliberate, weaving through the throng. The invitation, secured through a discreet contact in Istanbul's diplomatic circles, had granted him entry, but anonymity was his ally tonight. The coded message, scrawled in elegant script, had read, "Seek the sapphire star at the midnight waltz. The locket holds the key." Poirot's mind churned, parsing the words. A sapphire star suggested a woman, perhaps, adorned in blue, and the midnight waltz was mere minutes away. He glanced at his pocket, watch 11:45 p.m., quickened his pace toward the edge of the dance floor. A woman caught his eye, standing near a marble pillar, her gown a cascade of sapphire silk that shimmered like the Bosporus under moonlight. A silver mask, adorned with delicate sapphire gems, obscured her face, but her poise suggested confidence, perhaps danger. She held a fan, its slow movements belying the alertness in her posture. Poirot approached, bowing slightly. "Madame," he said in French, his voice smooth as velvet, "may I have the honor of this dance?" Her lips, visible beneath the mask, curved into a faint smile. "You speak as if from another era, monsieur," she replied, her accent a blend of Parisian elegance and something less discernible, Eastern European. "Perhaps." She extended a gloved hand, and Poirot led her to the floor as the orchestra struck up the midnight waltz. As they moved in perfect rhythm, Poirot studied her. The sapphire gown clung to her form, and a locket hung at her throat, its silver surface etched with intricate designs. "A beautiful locket," he remarked, his tone casual but probing. "A family heirloom, perhaps." Her eyes, dark and unreadable behind the mask, flickered with amusement. "You are observant, monsieur. It is a keepsake, nothing more." Her voice was a melody, but Poirot detected a guarded edge. He spun her gently, noting the way her gaze darted to a man across the room, Ambassador Renaud, unmistakable in his gold-trimmed mask and military bearing. conversing with a Turkish official. The ambassador seems popular tonight, Poirot said, testing her reaction. Her grip on his hand tightened imperceptibly. Popularity is a burden, she replied, her tone light but her eyes narrowing. He attracts all sorts, does he not? Indeed, Poirot said, his mind racing. Some might say he attracts danger. The waltz ended, and she stepped back, her fan snapping shut. You are bold, monsieur, she said, her smile now tinged with wariness. Perhaps too bold for a mere dance partner. Before he could respond, she glided away, her sapphire gown vanishing into the crowd like a specter. Poirot's heart quickened. She was no ordinary guest, and the locket was no mere trinket. He needed to see it again, to decipher its inscription. But first, he had to keep Renaud in sight. The ambassador was now surrounded by a coterie of admirers, his laughter ringing out, oblivious to the threat Poirot was certain loomed near. The detective moved to a nearby alcove, where a waiter offered him a flute of champagne. He declined with a polite nod, his eyes never leaving Renaud. A commotion near the ballroom's entrance drew his attention. A man, in a harlequin costume, his mask garish with red and black diamonds, stumbled into a table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. The crowd gasped, and Renard turned, his hand instinctively moving to his side, where a holster might be. Poirot noted. The harlequin apologized profusely in broken Turkish, but Poirot's instincts flared. A distraction. He scanned the room for the woman in sapphire. She was nowhere to be seen. Poirot slipped through the crowd, his small stature an advantage as he navigated the sea of gowns and tuxedos. He reached the ambassador's side just as a new figure approached a man in a plain black mask, his movements too precise, too purposeful. The man leaned close to Renard, whispering something that made the ambassador's face pale. Poirot edged closer, catching fragments of the exchange. Midnight, the treaty, betrayal. The man in the black mask retreated, and Poirot followed, keeping his distance. The trail led to a dimly lit corridor off the ballroom, where tapestries of Ottoman battles adorned the walls. The man paused at a heavy oak door, glanced around, and slipped inside. Poirot waited a moment, then tested the door and lock. He entered, finding himself in a small library, its shelves lined with leather-bound tomes. The man was gone, but a faint rustle came from behind a bookcase. Poirot's hand hovered over the concealed pocket, where he kept a small revolver insurance, though he preferred his wits. He approached the bookcase, his fingers tracing the spines, until one, a volume of Rumi's poetry, clicked under pressure. The bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated, then descended, his polished shoes silent on the stone steps. The staircase opened into a subterranean chamber, its walls damp and lit by a single flickering lantern. The woman in sapphire stood there, her mask removed, revealing a striking face, high cheekbones, dark eyes, and a scar faintly visible along her jaw. She was speaking in low tones to the man in the black mask, who held a dossier stamped with a crimson seal. Poirot crouched behind a crate, straining to hear. Renard must not leave Istanbul, the woman said, her voice cold. The treaty is in his possession. If it reaches Paris, it won't. The man interrupted. The distraction is in place. By dawn, he'll be indisposed. Poirot's mind raced. The treaty, likely the same one mentioned in the Grand Bazaar, was the key to this conspiracy. But why target Renard? And what was the woman's role? He needed the locket's inscription to confirm his suspicions. He edged closer, but a loose stone betrayed him. Clattering to the floor, the woman's head snapped toward the sound. "Who's there?" she demanded, her hand slipping into her gown likely for a weapon. Poirot stood, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Pardonnez-moi, madame," he said, stepping into the light. "I seem to have lost my way. A most fascinating library, Nan." Her eyes narrowed, but the man in the black mask moved faster, drawing a dagger. "You're no guest," he growled. "Who sent you?" Poirot's smile was disarming. "Only my curiosity, monsieur. It is a failing, I confess, but one that often leads to Enlightenment. He sidestepped subtly, positioning himself near the lantern. Perhaps you could enlighten me about this treaty. The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You're a bold little man, but you're out of your depth. She nodded to the man, who lunged. Poirot, anticipating the move, kicked the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. A scuffle ensued. Grunts, the clatter of the dagger hitting stone. Poirot's nimble fingers found the locket, which had fallen in the chaos, and he slipped it into his pocket. Before scrambling up the stairs, he emerged into the library, heart pounding, and closed the bookcase just as footsteps echoed below. The ballroom's music greeted him as he re-entered the crowd, his mask slightly askew but his composure intact. Renard was still there, now dancing with a woman in emerald green. Poirot retreated to a quiet corner, his fingers tracing the locket's surface. The inscription was faint, worn by time, but under the chandelier's light, he made it out. 2E, from V. Paris holds the truth. Paris, the next piece of the puzzle. But who was E and V? The woman in sapphire, perhaps, was no mere conspirator. Her scar, her poise, her command suggested a deeper motive. Poirot pocketed the locket, his mind already planning his journey to Paris. He glanced at Renard, who seemed unaware of the danger that had brushed so close. The ambassador would be safe for now, but the treaty and the woman remained at large. As the clock struck 1, Poirot slipped out of the palace, the locket heavy in his pocket. The night air was cool, and the stars above Istanbul glittered like the sapphires of the woman's gown. He hailed a car, his thoughts racing ahead to Paris, where the next chapter of this covert chase awaited. The conspiracy was vast, its tendrils reaching across continents. But Hercule Poirot was undeterred. His little gray cells hummed with purpose, and the game, as always, was afoot. Chapter 5. The Gallery of Deceptions. The Parisian evening draped itself over the city like a velvet curtain, its air thick with the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and the faint hum of distant jazz. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stepped from the taxi onto the Rue de Rivoli, his silver-headed cane tapping lightly against the pavement. The art gallery ahead, Galerie Éclat, glowed with golden light, its tall windows casting an inviting warmth into the chilly dusk. Yet Poirot's sharp eyes, glinting like polished agates, betrayed no ease. The locket from the Istanbul masked ball, its coded inscription now deciphered, had led him here, a place where beauty masked treachery, and every canvas might conceal a lie. The locket's message had been concise. Seek the shadow in Clat's heart. Poirot had spent the train journey from Istanbul puzzling over its meaning, his little gray cells humming with possibilities. The gallery was no ordinary venue. It was a nexus of wealth, influence, and secrets, frequented by Paris's elite and, whispered the house, more than mere art. As he adjusted his bow tie and smoothed his mustache, Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chaser puzzle begging to be solved, a truth waiting to be unveiled. Inside, the gallery buzzed with the chatter of the haute monde. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over gilded frames and vibrant paintings, while waiters in crisp livery wove through the crowd with trays of champagne. Poirot's arrival drew curious glances. His reputation as a detective preceded him. Though he preferred to blend into the tapestry of faces, he accepted a flute of champagne, holding it more for appearance than intent, and began his reconnaissance. The gallery's centerpiece was a grand exhibition of Renaissance-inspired works by a reclusive artist, Monsieur Julien Vassar. His paintings, rich with allegory and shadow, dominated the main hall. Poirot's gaze lingered on one in particular, the Veiled Muse, a haunting depiction of a woman cloaked in sapphire, her eyes obscured by a translucent veil. The brushstrokes were meticulous, almost alive, and something in the composition tugged at Poirot's instincts. Could this be the shadow the locket's message referenced? As he studied the painting, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Monsieur Poirot, an unexpected pleasure. The speaker was a wiry man with slick-back hair and a smile too polished to be genuine. He extended a hand adorned with a gaudy emerald ring. Antoine Dubois, owner of Gallery Eclat. Your presence graces our humble exhibition. Poirot inclined his head, his smile courteous but guarded. Monsieur Dubois, the pleasure is mine. Your gallery is a marvel, and Vassar's work most intriguing. Dubois's eyes flickered, as if weighing Poirot's words. Vassar is a genius, though reclusive. His paintings, they speak to those who listen closely. Would you care for a private tour? I have pieces in the back not yet revealed to the public. The offer was tempting, perhaps too much so. Poirot sensed a test. Most kind, monsieur, but I am content to explore at my leisure. Tell me, does Vassar ever attend such events? Dubois chuckled, a sound like dry leaves. He prefers solitude, but his art speaks for him. Come, let me introduce you to some guests. They'd be delighted to meet the famous detective. Poirot allowed himself to be guided, his senses attuned to every detail. The crowd was a mosaic of Parisian society, a countess in emerald silk, a banker with a nervous tic, a young poetess whose eyes darted too often to the exits. Dubois introduced him to each, his charm as slick as oil. But Poirot's attention remained on the gallery itself. The walls seemed to whisper, their secrets hidden in plain sight. As the evening progressed, Poirot drifted toward a quieter wing of the gallery, where lesser-known works hung in dimmer light. Here, the air felt heavier, the shadows deeper. A small painting caught his eye, an unassuming still life of a pomegranate and a quill, its frame slightly askew. Something about its placement felt deliberate, out of harmony with the gallery's meticulous order. He stepped closer, his fingers brushing the frame. A faint click sounded, and the painting swung inward, revealing a concealed compartment. Inside was a folded parchment, its edges yellowed with age. Poirot's heart quickened as he unfolded it, revealing a hand-drawn map marked with a single red X. The map depicted a street layout unfamiliar to him, but a scrawled note in the margin read, Safe House Rue des Ombres. This was no coincidence. The locket had led him to a tangible clue. Before he could study it further, a shadow fell across the alcove. Poirot turned to find Dubois watching him, his smile now a thin veneer over suspicion. Monsieur Poirot, you have a knack for finding hidden treasures. That painting is merely decorative, I assure you. Decorative, perhaps, Poirot replied, tucking the map into his pocket with a fluid motion. But even the simplest art can conceal a story. Nan. Dubois's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. Indeed, but come, the night is young, and I have a special piece to show you, a Vassar original, not yet unveiled. Reluctantly, Poirot followed, sensing a shift in the game. Dubois led him to a private room, its walls lined with velvet drapes. A single painting rested on an easel, covered by a cloth. With a theatrical flourish, Dubois unveiled it, revealing a near-identical replica of the Veiled Muse. The colors were vibrant, the composition flawless, too flawless. Poirot's mustache twitched. A remarkable piece, monsieur. But tell me, why display a copy when the original hangs in the main hall? Dubois froze, his smile faltering. A copy? You wound me. Monsieur Poirot, this is Vassar's own work, a companion piece. Nan, Poirot said, stepping closer. The brushstrokes lack the subtlety of the original. The veil's texture is too uniform. A forgery, perhaps meant to deceive. The accusation hung in the air. Dubois's face darkened, but before he could respond, a waiter approached, with a tray bearing a single glass of red wine. For you, Monsieur Poirot, compliments of the gallery. Poirot's instincts flared. The waiter's hand trembled slightly, and the wine's surface shimmered with an unnatural sheen. Most generous, Poirot said, taking the glass but setting it untouched on a nearby table. Alas, I prefer a tisane in the evening. Wine, it disrupts the little gray cells. The waiter paled and retreated, but Dubois's composure cracked. You are too cautious, Monsieur Poirot, a pity, he signaled subtly, and two burly men in evening attire appeared at the room's edges, their postures tense. Poirot's mind raced. The The map in his pocket was the key, but he was cornered. He needed a distraction. "Monsieur Dubois," he said, loudly, drawing the attention of nearby guests, "your hospitality is unmatched, but I fear I must decline further indulgences. A matter of urgency calls me elsewhere." Before Dubois could protest, Poirot moved swiftly toward the main hall, weaving through the crowd. The burly men followed, their steps heavy but discreet. Poirot's eyes scanned for an exit, settling on a service door near the kitchens. He slipped through, emerging into a narrow alley behind the gallery. The rain had intensified, slicking the cobblestones underfoot. Footsteps echoed behind him. Poirot quickened his pace, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The alley twisted into a maze of back streets, the perfect place for an ambush or an escape. He spotted a stack of crates and, with surprising agility for a man of his stature, ducked behind them. The pursuers passed, their curses muffled by the rain. Safe for the moment, Poirot examined the map under the faint glow of a street lamp. The red X marked a location on the outskirts of Paris, a chateau in the countryside. The note's mention of Rue des Ambers suggested a hidden safe house, perhaps the next link in the conspiracy. But the forged painting and the poisoned wine confirmed a darker truth. Someone knew he was closing in, and they would kill to stop him. He hailed a taxi, directing the driver to a modest hotel where he could plan his next move. As the city blurred past, Poirot's thoughts churned. The forged veiled muse was no mere deception. It was a signal, a taunt from the conspirators. The woman in sapphire, from the masked ball, her locket. Her presence loomed large in his mind. Was she an ally, a pawn, or the mastermind? At the hotel, Poirot secured a room under an alias and spread the map across the desk. The chateau location was remote, likely fortified. He would need more than wit to infiltrate it. His ally from Istanbul, the archaeologist Dr. Elise Moreau, was still in Paris, having followed him to assist. Her knowledge of ancient codes and her courage in the bazaar had proven invaluable. He penned a brief note, arranging to meet her at dawn near the Pontaine EUF. As he prepared for bed, Poirot's gaze fell on the locket, now resting beside the map. Its inscription, "Seek the Shadow," echoed in his mind. The gallery had been a test, a labyrinth of deceptions designed to deter him. Yet every false step revealed the truth. The poisoned wine, the forged painting, the hidden map all were threads in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. The next morning, Poirot met Elise at the bridge, her auburn hair tucked under a practical cap. "Hercule, you look as if you've seen a ghost," she said, her green eyes sharp with concern. "Not a ghost, mademoiselle, but a shadow," Poirot replied, handing her the map. "This leads to a chateau, a safe house, but last night I was nearly poisoned, and a forgery nearly fooled me. We are close, but the danger grows." Elise studied the map, her brow furrowing. "Rue des Ambers, it's a code name, not a real street. This chateau is isolated, likely guarded. We'll need a plan." "Oui, Poirot," said, his voice firm, "and we shall have one." The conspirators believe they have outwitted Hercule Poirot. They are mistaken. Together, they plotted their approach, unaware that the chateau held secrets that would test Poirot's intellect and courage to their limits. The gallery's deceptions were but a prelude. The true battle lay ahead, where shadows would give way to light or consume them entirely. Chapter 6. The Safe House Secret. The French countryside stretched before Hercule Poirot, like a tapestry woven in shades of emerald and gold. Its rolling hills bathed in the soft light of a late summer afternoon. The chateau, nestled in a secluded valley an hour's drive from Paris, loomed ahead, a grand, ivy-clad edifice, with turrets piercing the sky like the ambitions of its long-forgotten builders. Its windows glinted with secrets, and Poirot, ever attuned to the whispers of mystery, felt a prickle of anticipation as he stepped from the hired car. The map he had retrieved from the Parisian art gallery, concealed within the frame of a forged Renoir, had led him here. Its intricate lines and cryptic annotations pointed to a hidden chamber within this chateau, a place where answers to the conspiracy threatening Europe's delicate alliances might be found. Poirot adjusted his impeccable Homburg hat, his gloved fingers brushing the brim, and murmured to himself, "The truth. It hides like a shy debutante, but Hercule Poirot shall coax it into the light." His companion, Dr. Evelyn Carver, the archaeologist who had joined him on the Orient Express, stood beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the chateau's facade. Her auburn hair was tucked beneath a practical cap, and her tweed jacket bore the faint dust of their journey through Istanbul's bazaars and Paris's shadowed galleries. "This place feels like it's holding its breath," she said, her voice low, as if the very stones might overhear. "What do you expect to find, Monsieur Poirot?" "Clarity, my dear doctor," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching with a faint smile, "and perhaps a touch of danger." The two, they often danced together. They approached the chateau's entrance, a heavy oak door carved with faded heraldry. The air carried the scent of lavender and old stone, mingling with the distant temps of a storm brewing on the horizon. Poirot's polished shoes clicked on the gravel path, a metronome to his racing thoughts. The map had hinted at a dossier, a collection of secrets that could unmask the players in a shadowy plot to destabilize diplomatic ties. But who guarded such secrets, and what price would they demand for their revelation? The door creaked open before Poirot could knock, revealing a wiry man in a butler's livery, his face as expressionless as a porcelain mask. "Monsieur Poirot, I presume." His accent was clipped, betraying a hint of Eastern Europe beneath his French. "You are expected." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Expected? By whom?" "Monsieur, I have made no appointment." The butler's lips barely moved. "The master of the house anticipates all who seek what is hidden. Follow me." Evelyn exchanged a glance with Poirot, her hand tightening on the strap of her satchel. "I don't like this," she whispered. "It's too easy." "Ease, doctor, is often the prelude to complication," Poirot murmured, stepping across the threshold. The foyer was a cavern of opulence, its marble floor gleaming beneath a chandelier that dripped with crystal. Tapestries adorned the walls, their threads depicting battles and betrayals of centuries past. The butler led them through a maze of corridors, each turn revealing glimpses of grandeur, gilded mirrors, portraits with eyes that seemed to follow, and the faint echo of their footsteps. They were ushered into a library, its shelves towering to a vaulted ceiling. The air was thick with the musty scent of leather-bound tomes and the faint metallic temps of ink. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting flickering shadows across a long table where a single figure sat, his back to them. His hair was silver, his posture rigid, and the click of his fountain pen against paper was the only sound breaking the silence. "Monsieur Poirot," the man said without turning, his voice smooth as polished obsidian. "You have a reputation for uncovering what others wish to remain buried. I am intrigued." Poirot stepped forward, his cane tapping lightly on the parquet floor. "And you, monsieur, have the advantage of me. To whom do I owe the pleasure of this invitation?" The man rose and turned, revealing a face both handsome and severe, with deep-set eyes that gleamed like a hawk's. "I am Victor Laurent," he said, extending a hand gloved in black leather. "Collector of rare things, books, artifacts, and, occasionally, secrets. You seek a dossier, do you not?" Poirot's mustache quivered, but his expression remained serene. "You are well-informed, Monsieur Laurent, perhaps too well. May I inquire how you know of my quest?" Laurent's smile was a blade's edge. "The walls of this chateau have ears, and the world beyond them speaks in whispers. The dossier you seek is here, but it is not a trifle to be handed over lightly. It contains truths that could topple governments or ignite wars." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Then why invite us at all? If it's so dangerous, why not burn it and be done?" Laurent's gaze flicked to her, appraising. "Because, Dr. Carver, knowledge is power, and power is never destroyed, is wielded. I wish to know what Monsieur Poirot intends to do with such power." Poirot's eyes gleamed with the spark of a challenge. "I intend, monsieur, to restore order, to prevent chaos. But first, I must see this dossier. Will you permit it?" Laurent gestured to a concealed panel on the wall, its outline barely visible behind a tapestry. The dossier lies within a hidden chamber. But beware, those who seek it are not always what they seem, and the chamber is not unguarded. The butler reappeared, silent as a specter, and pressed a hidden catch. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. Poirot felt a chill, not from the air, but from the weight of what lay ahead. He glanced at Evelyn, who nodded, her jaw set. Together, they descended, the butler's lantern casting jagged shadows on the damp walls. The staircase ended in a chamber carved from the bedrock, its walls lined with steel cabinets. In the center stood a pedestal, and atop it, a leather-bound dossier, its edges worn but its presence commanding. Poirot approached, his fingers itching to open it, but a faint click stopped him cold. The air shifted, and a panel in the ceiling slid open, releasing a figure clad in black. The intruder moved like a panther, silent and swift, a curved blade glinting in their hand. "Step away, Poirot," a voice rasped, distorted by a mask. "The dossier isn't yours to take." Evelyn lunged, her satchel swinging, but the figure dodged with eerie grace. Poirot, however, was not idle. He tapped his cane sharply against the floor, the sound echoing in the confined space. "You mistake me, mon ami," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "I do not take what is not offered, but neither do I retreat from truth." The figure hesitated, and in that moment Poirot's keen eyes caught a glint of metal on the floor, a hidden pressure plate. He stepped back, pulling Evelyn with him. Just as the figure lunged, the plate triggered, and a net of weighted chains dropped from the ceiling, ensnaring the intruder. They thrashed, the blade clattering to the ground, but the chains held firm. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, brushing dust from his coat. "The chateau, it seems, protects its secrets with vigor." Evelyn, breathing heavily, retrieved the dossier. "This better be worth it," she muttered, flipping it open. Inside were pages of coded text, photographs of diplomats, and financial records linking names Poirot recognized from the Orient Express and Istanbul. One name stood out: Baron von Straub, a Viennese financier, rumored to fund shadowy operations. Before they could read further, footsteps echoed from the staircase. Laurent appeared, his face pale. "You've triggered the trap," he said, his voice tight. "Others will come. Take the dossier and go through the tunnel behind the cabinets. It leads to the river." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, Monsieur Laurent, why aid us now?" Laurent's smile was bitter. "Because I am a collector, not a conspirator. I tire of their games. Go, before the hounds arrive." Poirot hesitated, then nodded. He and Evelyn slipped behind the cabinets, finding a rusted grate that opened into a damp tunnel. As they hurried through, the sound of barking dogs and shouting voices faded behind them. The tunnel emerged at a riverbank, where a small boat waited, its oars gleaming in the moonlight. They rowed downstream, the dossier tucked safely in Poirot's coat. "This Baron von Straub," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the exertion. "He's the key, isn't he?" "Oui," Poirot replied, his mind racing. "But a key to what lock?" "The dossier. It speaks of a conspiracy vast and intricate. We must proceed to Vienna, but with caution. The hounds, they are not far behind." As the boat glided toward the horizon, Poirot's thoughts turned to the names in the dossier, the web of deceit, and the elusive truth that awaited. The chateau faded into the night, its secrets diminished but not extinguished, and Poirot knew the chase was far from over. Chapter 7. The midnight train to Vienna. The platform at Gare de l'Est was a study in contrasts. The gleam of polished brass on the train's engine clashed with the sooty haze that clung to the station's arched roof. Hercule Poirot stood beneath a flickering gas lamp, his overcoat buttoned against the late autumn chill, his mustache impeccably waxed despite the hour. It was just past 11, and the midnight train to Vienna was preparing to depart. The air thrummed with the low hum of anticipation, porters hauling trunks, lovers exchanging hurried farewells, and the occasional whistle of steam escaping the locomotive's iron belly. Poirot clutched a leather satchel containing the dossier he'd secured from the chateau outside Paris. Its pages, dense with cryptic notes and coded names, were a map to the heart of a conspiracy threatening Europe's fragile peace. The document was his lifeline, and he guarded it as fiercely as a mother her child. His destination, Vienna, where a reclusive financier named Baron von Straub held the next piece of the puzzle. But the journey promised peril, for Poirot knew the conspirators would stop at nothing to reclaim their secrets. He boarded the train with measured steps, his sharp eyes scanning the platform for any shadow out of place. The carriage was a marvel of opulence, polished mahogany panels, velvet upholstered seats, and crystal chandeliers swaying gently as the train shuddered to life. Poirot settled into his private compartment, a narrow space with a single window and a fold-down bed. He placed the satchel beneath his seat, secured by a discreet lock, and adjusted his cuff. "The little gray cells," he murmured, tapping his temple. "They must remain vigilant." The train's whistle pierced the night, and with a lurch, it began its journey eastward. Poirot drew the curtain aside and peered into the darkness, the lights of Paris fading like dying embers. He allowed himself a moment to savor the rhythm of the wheels, a steady clack-clack that soothed his meticulous mind. But peace was fleeting. A knock at the door startled him, and he arose, hand hovering near the concealed pocket, where he kept a small, elegant pistol, precaution he loathed, but deemed necessary. "Entrez," he called, his voice calm but edged with caution. The door slid open to reveal a young woman, perhaps 30, with auburn hair pinned loosely beneath a cloche hat. Her eyes, a striking green, held a mix of curiosity and urgency. "Monsieur Poirot," she asked, her accent faintly Irish. "I'm Clara Dunn, a journalist with the Dublin Herald. May I have a moment?" Poirot gestured to the seat opposite, his expression unreadable. "A journalist, mademoiselle, at this hour, on this train. The coincidence, it is remarkable." Clara smiled, undeterred by his skepticism. "Not a coincidence, monsieur. I've been following a story, a dangerous one. Rumors of a financier in Vienna, a man named von Straub, who's funding something sinister. I heard you were on this train, and I thought—" She hesitated, then leaned forward. "I thought you might know something." Poirot's mustache twitched. "The name von Straub is not unfamiliar," he said carefully. "But tell me, mademoiselle, why should Hercule Poirot share his confidences with a stranger?" Clara reached into her handbag and produced a notebook, its pages crowded with shorthand. "Because I have information you might need. Von Straub's been meeting with a man called the Raven. Does that mean anything to you?" The name sent a chill through Poirot, though he betrayed nothing. The Raven was a shadow, a cody name whispered in the dossier's margins, linked to the conspiracy's heart. "Perhaps," he said, his tone neutral. "But information, it is a currency. What do you offer, and what do you seek?" Clara's eyes gleamed with determination. "I offer what I know. Von Straub's estate is a fortress, guarded by men who don't ask questions. He's hosting a poker game tomorrow night. High stakes, invitation only. I can get you in. In return, I want the story exclusive." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "A poker game, you say? And how does a journalist from Dublin secure such an invitation?" "My editor has connections," she replied, a touch defensive. "We've been tracking von Straub for months. I'm not here by accident." Monsieur Poirot studied her, his mind racing. She could be an alior, a plant. The conspirators were cunning, and a charming journalist was precisely the sort of disguise they might employ. Yet her knowledge of the Raven suggested she was either deeply informed or dangerously reckless. Either way, she was a piece of the puzzle he could not ignore. "Very well, mademoiselle," he said at last. "We shall see what the night brings. But know this, Hercule Poirot trusts no one until the truth reveals itself." Clara nodded, rising. "Fair enough. I'll be in compartment 12 if you change your mind." She paused at the door. "And monsieur, be careful. This train isn't as safe as it looks." As the door slid shut, Poirot's gaze returned to the window. The countryside blurred past, a tapestry of moonlit fields and shadowed forests. Clara's warning echoed in his mind, and he resolved to keep the dossier close. He opened his satchel, withdrawing a single page to study under the dim light of the compartment's lamp. The text was a labyrinth of codes, but one phrase stood out. The raven flies at midnight. It was no coincidence that he was on this train. At this hour, the night deepened, and the train's rhythm became hypnotic. Poirot's thoughts drifted to the dossier's contents, names, dates, and transactions that pointed to a network of power brokers intent on destabilizing Europe's alliances. Baron von Straub was a key player, but the raven was the enigma. Was it von Straub himself? Or someone higher, pulling strings from the shadows? A sudden jolt snapped him from his reverie. The train slowed, its brakes screeching as it approached an unscheduled stop. Poirot's instincts flared. He tucked the dossier into a hidden compartment beneath the seat's cushion, secured by a mechanism of his own design. Slipping into the corridor, he moved silently, his polished shoes barely whispering against the carpet. The corridor was empty, save for a porter who looked startled at Poirot's appearance. "Monsieur, you should return to your compartment," the man stammered. "A minor delay, nothing more." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the cause of this delay, monsieur?" "A signal issue, I believe," the porter replied, avoiding his gaze. Poirot did not press further. He returned to his compartment, but left the door slightly ajar, positioning himself to observe the corridor through insufficientia pulmonar obstructiva chronica de crack. Minutes passed, and then he saw a figure in a dark overcoat, moving with purpose toward the rear of the carriage. The figure paused at compartment 12, Clara's compartment, and slipped inside. Poirot's heart quickened. He retrieved his pistol and moved swiftly, his steps muffled by the train's renewed motion. At Clara's door, he listened. Voices low and urgent filtered through. "You were told to stay out of this," a man's voice hissed, accented with a Eastern European lilt. "The dossier, where is it?" "I don't have it." Clara's voice was defiant but strained. "I'm just a journalist, I swear." A scuffle, then a muffled cry. Poirot acted. He pushed the door open, pistol raised, and found Clara pinned against the wall by a wiry man with a scar across his cheek. The man's eyes widened at Poirot's entrance, and he lunged, a knife gleaming in his hand. Poirot sidestepped, his movements precise, and struck the man's wrist with the butt of his pistol. The knife clattered to the floor, and Clara seized the moment, kicking the man's shin. He stumbled, and Poirot delivered a sharp blow to his temple, sending him crumpling to the ground. Clara gasped, clutching her throat where the man's hand had been. "Thank you," she whispered, her composure fraying. Poirot knelt beside the unconscious man, searching his pockets. He found a railway ticket, a vial of colorless liquid, and a scrap of paper with a single word, "Raven." He pocketed the items and turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you attract dangerous company." She managed a shaky laugh. "Occupational hazard." "Who was he?" "A thief, perhaps, or something more," Poirot replied, his mind already dissecting the encounter. "He sought the dossier, which suggests our enemies are close." Clara's eyes flicked to his satchel, now safely retrieved from his compartment. "You have it, don't you?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Let us say I am prepared. But you, mademoiselle, must explain why this man targeted you." Clara hesitated, then sighed. "I've been digging into von Straub's finances. My editor got a tip about a shipment of gold moving through Vienna, linked to the conspiracy. I think they know I'm on to them." Poirot nodded, his suspicions about her deepening. "And this poker game you mentioned, it's real," she insisted. "Tomorrow night, at von Straub's estate. I can get you in, but you'll need a disguise. He doesn't trust strangers." "Disguises, mademoiselle, are a specialty of Hercule Poirot," he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "But first, we must ensure this man does not trouble us again." Together, they bound the intruder with a curtain cord and locked him in the compartment's tiny bathroom. Poirot summoned the conductor, a stout man with a nervous demeanor, and instructed him to alert the authorities at the next station. "This man attempted a robbery," Poirot said smoothly, omitting the details of the dossier. "See that he is detained." The conductor nodded, clearly relieved to have a solution. As he left to make arrangements, Clara turned to Poirot. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "Most detectives would have panicked." "Panic, mademoiselle, is the enemy of the little gray cells," Poirot replied, tapping his temple again. "Now, tell me more of this poker game. Every detail, if you please." As the train hurtled toward Vienna, Clara shared what she knew. The game was a front for von Straub to meet his allies, a gathering of power brokers disguised as a night of high-stakes gambling. The guest list included diplomats, smugglers, and a mysterious figure known only as the broker. Poirot listened, his mind weaving a tapestry of possibilities. The raven, the dossier, the gold shipment all were threads in a web he was determined to unravel. The night wore on, and Poirot returned to his compartment, the dossier once more secure. He sat by the window, the darkness outside reflecting his thoughts. Clara was a wild card, her motives unclear, but her information was invaluable. The intruder's attack confirmed that the conspirators were desperate, and desperation bred mistakes. Poirot would exploit those mistakes, as he always did. At dawn, the train pulled into Vienna's Hauptbahnhof, the city's spires glinting in the early light. Poirot stepped onto the platform, Clara at his side. "We have a day to prepare," she said. "The game starts at 9. "Then we must be ready," Poirot replied, his voice steady. "For tonight, mademoiselle, we play a game far more dangerous than poker. The dossier remains safe, its secrets intact, and Poirot's resolve was stronger than ever. The Baron's estate awaited, a fortress of intrigue, where the next clue to the Raven's identity lay hidden. As he walked into the bustling city, Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chase, his mind alight with the certainty that the truth, however elusive, could not escape Hercule Poirot. Chapter 8. The Baron's Gambit. The Viennese night was crisp, the air laced with the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor's cart. Hercule Poirot adjusted the brim of his fedora, his polished shoes clicking softly against the cobblestones of a narrow alley near the Baron von Straub's estate. The dossier he had secured on the midnight train to Vienna lay tucked inside his overcoat, its weight a reminder of the stakes. The name Baron von Straub had surfaced like a dark current beneath the surface of the conspiracy, a reclusive financier whose influence rippled through Europe's shadowed corridors. Tonight, Poirot would infiltrate the Baron's world, a high-stakes poker game where the chips were secrets and the players held more than cards. The estate loomed ahead, a Baroque masterpiece of pale stone and arched windows, its grandeur softened by the glow of gas lamps. Musica lilting waltz drifted from within, mingling with the clink of glasses and the murmur of aristocratic voices. Poirot had learned of the game through a whispered tip from the journalist on the train, a man whose knack for gossip had proven useful. The Baron, it seemed, hosted exclusive gatherings where the elite wagered fortunes and traded confidences. If the conspiracy's threads led here, Poirot would need to blend seamlessly into this gilded world. He had prepared meticulously. His alias, Monsieur Etienne Dubois, was a wealthy Belgian investor with a penchant for rare antiquities, a persona crafted to appeal to the Baron's ego. His attire, a tailored black suit with a silk cravat, was impeccable, his mustache waxed to perfection. In his pocket, a forged invitation, secured through a discreet contact in Vienna's underworld, granted him entry. Poirot's mind, sharp as a rapier, churned with possibilities. The dossier had named the Baron as a linchpin in the conspiracy, but its details were maddeningly vague. A list of names, a hidden safe somewhere within this opulent estate lay, the key to unraveling the plot at the iron gates. A liveried footman scrutinized the invitation, his eyes narrowing. Poirot offered a disarming smile. "Monsieur Dubois, at your service. I trust the Baron is expecting me." The footman hesitated, then nodded, ushering him through. The courtyard was a spectacle of wealth. Marble fountains bubbled under crystal. Chandeliers hung from pergolas, and guests in evening dress flitted like moths around flickering torches. Poirot's gaze swept the scene, cataloging faces. A woman in emerald silk laughed too loudly. A man with a monocle whispered to a companion. None matched the Baron's description. A tall, silver-haired man with a scar tracing his left cheek. Inside the ballroom was a vision of excess. Gilded mirrors reflected candlelight, and a string quartet played beneath a frescoed ceiling. Poirot accepted a flute of champagne from a passing waiter, sipping it lightly to maintain his clarity. The poker game, he had been told, was held in a private salon on the second floor, accessible only to the Baron's inner circle. To reach it, he would need to navigate this sea of privilege without arousing suspicion. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Monsieur Dubois, is it? You have the look of a man who knows his way around a wager." Poirot turned to find a woman in her 40s, her auburn hair swept into an elegant sheen. Her gown, a deep burgundy, shimmered with understated wealth, and her eyes held a glint of mischief. "Madame," he said, bowing slightly, "you have me at a disadvantage." "May I know to whom I speak?" "Countess Irina Volkova," she replied, extending a gloved hand. "I make it my business to know the new faces in Vienna circles. You're not one of the usual civilians." Poirot chuckled, sensing an opportunity. "I prefer to think of myself as a connoisseur of opportunity. Countess, tell me, is the Baron's game as exclusive as they say?" Her lips curved. "More so. The Baron guards his table like a dragon its hoard. But a man of your bearing might find a way in." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Be careful, though. The stakes are never just money." Her warning lingered as she drifted into the crowd. Poirot's instincts prickled. The Countess knew more than she let on, perhaps an ally, perhaps a player in the game. He filed her name away, his mind already mapping the path to the salon. The staircase to the second floor was guarded by a burly man in a black suit, his eyes scanning the guests with practiced vigilance. Poirot approached, his forged invitation ready. "Monsieur Dubois, invited by the Baron himself," he said smoothly, presenting the card. The guard examined it, then grunted. "Upstairs, third door on the right. Don't wander." Poirot ascended, his heart steady but his senses alert. The hallway was lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow him. At the third door, he knocked, and a voice called, "Enter." The salon was a contrast to the ballroom's extravagant sentiment, dimly lit, with a heavy mahogany table at its center. 5 men sat around it, cards fanned before them, cigar smoke curling in the air. At the head was Baron von Straub, unmistakable, with his silver hair and scarred cheek. His presence was commanding, his eyes cold and calculating. "Monsieur Dubois," the Baron said, his voice smooth as polished steel, "your reputation precedes you. Join us." Poirot took the empty chair, his mind racing. The other players were a mix of wealth and influence: a German industrialist, a French diplomat, a Russian émigré, and a British lord. The game was poker, Texas Hold'em, a choice that surprised Poirot for its American audacity in this old world setting. He had played before, though not at such stakes. Tonight, he would need to wield his cards as deftly as his deductions. The first hand was dealt, and Poirot observed his opponents. The industrialist bet aggressively, the diplomat cautiously. The Russian drank heavily, his bets erratic, while the lord played with a detached air. The Baron, however, was unreadable, his scarred face a mask. Poirot folded early, using the time to study the room. A tapestry on the far wall caught his eye, its stitching slightly uneven, as if concealing something, a safe, perhaps. As the game progressed, Poirot began to weave his persona, peppering conversation with tales of fictitious antiquities. The Baron's interest piqued when Poirot mentioned a rare Byzantine relic. "A man of taste," the Baron said, dealing a new hand. "But taste alone doesn't win at this table." "Nor does haste," Poirot replied, meeting the Baron's gaze. He raised a bet, drawing a murmur from the table. The move was bold, designed to test the Baron's nerve. The financier matched it without hesitation. Hours passed, the stakes climbing. Poirot's stack of chips dwindled, but his true wager was information. He noticed the Baron's subtle signals: a tap of the finger when bluffing, a slight tilt of the head when confident. The other players were less guarded, their tales betraying greed or desperation. The Russian, now deep in his cups, let slip a reference to the treaty, earning a sharp glance from the Baron. Poirot seized the opening. "Treaties are such delicate things, are they not?" he said lightly, tossing a chip into the pot. "Like relics, they require careful handling." The Baron's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if you know more than antiquities, Monsieur Dubois. Only that secrets, like cards, are best kept close," Poirot replied, his tone disarming. He folded again, preserving his chips while planting a seed of doubt. The game reached a crescendo as the Baron raised the pot to a staggering sum. The industrialist folded, cursing under his breath. The diplomat hesitated, then matched. The Lord and Russian dropped out, leaving Poirot. He studied his cards, a pair of aces, strong but not invincible. The Baron's tap of the finger suggested a bluff, but the risk was immense. Poirot pushed his remaining chips forward. "All in," he said, his voice steady. The table fell silent. The Baron's scar twitched, a rare tell. He matched the bet, revealing his hand, a flush. Poirot's aces were outmatched, and the table erupted in murmurs as the Baron swept the pot. "A bold move, Monsieur Dubois," the Baron said, his tone mocking. "But boldness without strategy is folly." Poirot smiled thinly. "Sometimes, Baron, the loss of chips is the price of a greater gain." The game paused as servants brought fresh drinks. Poirot excused himself, citing a need for air. In truth, he had memorized the tapestry's position. Slipping into the hallway, he found a side door leading to a darkened study. The tapestry hung there, as suspected. He lifted it, revealing a safe with a combination lock. The dossier had mentioned a list of conspirators. Could this be its hiding place? His fingers traced a dial, his mind recalling the Baron's tells, the tap of the finger 4 times in one hand. The head tilt twice. He tried a combination. 420. The safe clicked open, revealing a leather-bound ledger. Poirot skimmed it, his heart racing. Names, dates, payments, a network of conspirators tied to the treaty plot. He committed the list to memory, his photographic recall, a gift honed over years. Footsteps approached. Poirot closed the safe, replaced the tapestry, and slipped behind a curtain. The Baron entered, his silhouette sharp against the lamplight. He checked the safe, satisfied, then left. Poirot exhaled, but his relief was short-lived. A shout from the salon his absence had been noted. He returned, feigning a headache. The Baron's eyes bored into him. "You look pale, Monsieur Dubois. The game too much for you." "Merely the cigar smoke," Poirot replied, forcing a smile. "I shall retire, with your permission." The Baron nodded, but his gaze lingered. Poirot descended the stairs, his heart pounding. He had the list, but the Baron's suspicion was a ticking clock. As he reached the courtyard, a hand grabbed his arm. The Countess Volkova. "You're no investor," she whispered, her eyes sharp. "But you're not one of them either. Be careful, monsieur. The Baron doesn't forgive trespasses." Poirot nodded, extricating himself. "Good evening, Countess. Perhaps we shall meet again." He slipped into the night, the ledger's names burning in his mind. The conspiracy was vast, its players powerful, but Hercule Poirot had faced such odds before. As he vanished into Vienna's shadows, he knew the game was far from over. Chapter 9. The fog of Prague. The train to Prague sliced through the night, its rhythmic clatter a steady pulse beneath Hercule Poirot's thoughts. He sat alone in his compartment, the dossier from the Viennese adventure resting on his lap, its pages heavy with secrets. The name of Baron von Straub had led him here, to a city draped in mystery and shadow, where the next piece of the conspiracy awaited. The window beside him reflected his sharp features, neat mustache, piercing eyes, and a mind already turning over the possibilities. Prague, with its ancient spires and fog-choked alleys, was a fitting stage for the next act of this covert chase. The train slowed, and Poirot stepped onto the platform at Praha Hlavní Nadra, the station's vaulted ceiling echoing with the murmurs of late-night travelers. A damp chill hung in the air, and a faint mist curled around the gaslights, casting halos of light. that barely pierced the gloom. He adjusted his overcoat and hat, his cane tapping lightly as he moved toward the exit. The dossier had named a man, Kirill Wojciech, a former spy turned recluse, rumored to hold a clue to the conspiracy's next move. Wojciech was said to haunt the old town, a ghost among the cobblestones, and Poirot's task was to find him before the conspirators did. The streets of Prague were a labyrinth, their narrow paths twisting beneath Gothic facades and Baroque statues that seemed to watch his progress. The fog thickened as he crossed the Charles Bridge, its stone saints looming like silent sentinels. Poirot's eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker of movement. The Baron's list of conspirators had been a revelation, but it was incomplete. If he could be found, held the key to a Swiss bank vault, that might expose the conspiracy's financial roots. The stakes were high, and Poirot sensed the net tightening around him. He paused at a street corner, consulting a small map sketched from memory. Wojciech was said to frequent the old town square, but the dossier hinted at a more specific haunt, a forgotten cathedral, tucked away from the tourist throngs. Poirot's destination was the Church of St. Martin in the Wall, a relic of the city's medieval past, its spire barely visible through the fog. He moved swiftly, his steps muffled by the mist, aware that he was not alone in his pursuit. The conspirators would not let Wojciech speak easily. The church emerged from the fog, its weathered stone facade half hidden by ivy. The heavy oak door creaked as Poirot pushed it open, stepping into a cavernous interior lit only by flickering votive candles. The air was thick with the scent of wax and old stone, and the silence was profound, broken only by the faint drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Poirot's eyes adjusted to the dimness, scanning the pews and shadowed alcoves. At the far end, near the altar, a figure knelt in prayer, a man, slight and stooped, his coat threadbare, and his hair a tangled gray. Monsieur Wojciech. Poirot's voice was soft, but carried in the stillness. The man stiffened, his head turning slightly. "You're late," he said, his voice low and accented, tinged with weariness. "I told them midnight." Poirot stepped closer, his cane clicking against the stone floor. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I was not informed of any appointment. But I believe you have something. I seek a truth that others wish to keep buried." Wojciech rose slowly, his eyes wary but sharp, like those of a hunted animal. He was older than Poirot had expected, his face etched with lines of regret. "You're the detective," he said, almost to himself, "the one they fear. Why are you here, poking into shadows that don't concern you?" "They concern me greatly," Poirot replied, his tone firm but measured. "A treaty stolen, alliances threatened, lives at stake. You, Monsieur Wojciech, know something of this. A Swiss vault, perhaps." Wojciech's gaze darted to the darkened corners of the church, as if expecting an ambush. "You're bold to come here alone. They're watching, you know, always watching." "Then, let us speak quickly," Poirot said, stepping closer. "What do you know of the vault, and of the one called the Raven?" Wojciech's lips twitched, a bitter smile. "The Raven, a name that haunts my dreams. I was one of them, once, a spy for hire, trading secrets for gold. But I saw too much, knew too much. When I tried to leave, they made sure I'd never be free." He reached into his coat, producing a small, leather-bound notebook. "This is what you want. Coordinates, codes, the vault's location. But it comes at a price." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And what is that price?" "Protection," Wojciech whispered. "They'll kill me for this. They've been hunting me since I fled Vienna." Before Poirot could respond, a sharp crack split the air, a gunshot, muffled by a silencer. Wojciech gasped, clutching his chest, and collapsed onto the stone floor. Poirot dropped to a crouch, his heart racing as he scanned the darkness. A shadow moved in the gallery above, a glint of metal catching the candlelight. The sniper, Poirot, dove behind a pew as another shot rang out, splintering the wood above his head. Wojciech's notebook lay inches from the fallen man, its pages splayed open. Poirot crawled forward, his fingers brushing the leather, just as footsteps echoed from the rear of the church. The sniper was descending, and others were coming. Conspirators. closing in to ensure their secret died with Wojciech. With a swift motion, Poirot snatched the notebook and slipped it into his coat. He moved silently, using the pews as cover, his mind racing to map the church's layout. The main door was too exposed. He needed another way out. His eyes fell on a narrow side door near the altar, half hidden by a tapestry. He darted toward it, his cane abandoned in the haste, and pushed through into a cramped sacristy. The room was a dead end, its walls lined with dusty vestments and a single, high window. Poirot cursed under his breath, but his mind was already at work. He climbed onto a rickety table, forcing the window open with a grunt. The fog outside was a blessing now, cloaking him as he squeezed through the narrow frame and dropped into an alley below. The cold bit at his face as he ran. The notebook clutched tightly against his chest. Behind him, shouts echoed from the church. The conspirators, realizing their prey, had slipped away. Poirot turned down a side street, the fog swallowing his silhouette, and paused to catch his breath. He opened the notebook, its pages filled with cryptic numbers and a single, clear phrase: Zurich, Bank, von Hohenstein, Vault 17. The clue to the conspiracy's heart. But the chase was far from over. The sniper's shot had been precise, and death was a stark reminder of the forces aligned against him. Poirot tucked the notebook away and moved deeper into the fog, his mind alight with the next steps. Zurich awaited, and with it, the vault that could unravel everything or cost him his life. The fog of Prague seemed to cling to Poirot as he navigated the city's twisting alleys. The notebook a heavy weight in his pocket, he knew he could not linger. The conspirators were relentless, and Wojciech's death had raised the stakes. His first task was to secure a safe place to plan his next move. A small cafe near the Vltava River, its windows glowing faintly through the mist, offered temporary refuge. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of coffee and fresh bread. Poirot chose a corner table, his back to the wall, and ordered a tisane to calm his nerves. The cafe was sparsely populated, a weary traveler nursing a beer, a young couple whispering in Czech, an old man reading a newspaper with trembling hands. Poirot's eyes scanned each face, searching for any sign of pursuit. Satisfied for the moment, he opened the notebook again. Its pages a maze of codes and coordinates. Wojciech had been meticulous, his handwriting precise, despite his fear. The coordinates pointed to a bank in Zurich, but the accompanying code strings of letters and numbers were less clear. Poirot's mind, trained to find order in chaos, began to dissect them. One sequence, a 7B for X9, seemed to repeat, perhaps, a key to the vault's lock. Another note mentioned a contact in Zurich, a banker named Emil Faber, who might hold the final piece of the puzzle. As Poirot sipped his tisane, a shadow fell across his table. He looked up to find a woman standing before him, her dark hair tucked beneath a cloche hat, her eyes sharp and assessing. She was in her 30s, dressed in a tailored coat that spoke of wealth and purpose. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and accented, with a hint of Eastern Europe. "May I join you?" Poirot gestured to the chair opposite, his expression neutral but his senses alert. "You have the advantage, mademoiselle. You know my name, but I do not know yours." She smiled faintly, sitting with a grace that belied her tension. "Call me Alina. I knew Karel Wojciech. He spoke of you before tonight." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And how did you find me here?" "Prague is a small city for those who know its secrets," she replied, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Carol said you were hunting the raven. I can help you, but you must trust me." "Trust," Poirot said, his tone dry, "is a currency I spend sparingly. Why should I believe you are not one of them?" Alina leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was with Carol when he left the conspiracy. We were close. He wanted out, and I helped him hide. But they found him anyway." Her eyes glistened, but her jaw was set. "I want them stopped, Monsieur Poirot, for Carel, and for others they've hurt." Poirot studied her, his mind weighing her words against the risks. She could be an ally or a cleverly planted trap, yet her grief seemed genuine. and her knowledge of Wojciech suggested a connection that could prove useful. "Very well, Mademoiselle Alina," he said at last. "Tell me what you know of the Zurich vault." She glanced around the cafe, ensuring no one was listening. "The vault belongs to Bank von Hohenstein, a private institution that caters to the powerful," Carell said. "It holds documents proof of payments to mercenaries, bribes to officials, plans for chaos. The Raven uses it to fund their schemes. But the vault is guarded, not just by locks, but by men loyal to the cause." "And this Emile Faber?" Poirot prompted. "A banker with a conscience," Alina said. "He's been feeding Carol information, but he's terrified. If you can reach him, he might help you access the vault. But you'll need the codes from Carol's notebook and you'll need to move quickly. They know you have it now." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning to Zurich. "Then we must part ways, mademoiselle, for your safety and mine, but I will contact you when the time comes." Alina hesitated, then slid a small card across the table. "My address in Prague. If you need me, send word. But be careful, Monsieur Poirot. The Raven's eyes are everywhere." She rose and vanished into the fog outside, leaving Poirot alone with his thoughts. The card bore only a street name and number, written in elegant script. He tucked it into his pocket alongside the notebook, finishing his tisane with a final sip. The night was young, and Zurich was a day's journey away. He would need to secure passage and prepare for what awaited a vault that held the conspiracy's secrets, and a city where trust was as scarce as sunlight in this endless fog. The train to Zurich departed at dawn, and Poirot spent the journey in quiet contemplation, the notebook open before him. The codes were a puzzle, but one he relished. By the time the Alps came into view, their snow-capped peaks gleaming in the morning light, he had deciphered a second sequence, X9 A7B4. It matched the first, suggesting a dual-key system for the vault. The precision of it all delighted him, a testament to the order beneath the chaos of crime. Yet the memory of Wojciech's death lingered, a stark reminder of the danger. The sniper had been skilled, their aim deadly. Poirot's escape had been a matter of luck as much as cunning, and he could not rely on fortune alone. In Zurich, he would need allies, and Emile Faber was his best hope. But Elena's warning echoed in his mind. The Raven's eyes are everywhere. He would need to tread carefully, his every move calculated to avoid the fate that had claimed Wojciech. As the train pulled into Zurich's Hauptbahnhof, Poirot stepped onto the platform, the crisp mountain air a stark contrast to Prague's cloying fog. The city sparkled with efficiency, its streets lined with banks and boutiques. But beneath its polished surface lay the same shadows he had chased across Europe. The Bank von Hohenstein awaited, and with it, the truth that could bring the conspiracy to its knees, or bury Poirot in the process. He checked into a modest hotel near the Limmat River, using an alias to avoid detection. In his room, he spread the notebooks, pages across the desk, his fingers tracing the codes. The vault was close, its secrets within reach, but the path to it was fraught with peril. Poirot lit a cigarette, not his usual habit, but a rare indulgence. In moments of deep thought and exhaled a plume of smoke. Watching it curl toward the ceiling, like the fog of Prague. "Mon ami," he murmured to himself. "The game is afoot, and Hercule Poirot does not lose." The following morning, Poirot set out for the Bank von Hohenstein, its imposing marble facade a testament to wealth and secrecy. He wore a nondescript suit, his usual flamboyance subdued to avoid attention. The notebook was hidden in a false compartment of his briefcase, a precaution against prying hands. Inside the bank, the air was cool and hushed, the tellers moving with the precision of a Swiss clock. Poirot approached a clerk, requesting a meeting with Emile Faber. The clerk, a young man with a pinched expression, hesitated. "Herr Faber is unavailable," he said, his German crisp. "Perhaps another day." Poirot smiled, his charm disarming. "I am an old friend, you see, with urgent business. Tell Herr Faber that Monsieur Dupont sends his regards from Prague." The clerk's eyes flickered with recognition, or was it fear? and he disappeared into a back office. Moments later, a man emerged, his suit impeccable but his face pale, as if haunted by ghosts. Emile Faber was in his 50s, his hair thinning and his hands trembling slightly as he shook Poirot's. "Monsieur Dupont," Faber said, his voice low. "You come from Prague." "Indeed," Poirot replied, dropping the alias, now that they were alone. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I believe you knew Karol Wojciech." Faber's face drained of color. "Wojciech is dead, isn't he?" Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Faber's. "He left me a notebook with codes to a vault in this very bank. I need your help to open it." Faber glanced around, his voice barely audible. "You don't know what you're asking. They watch me, too. If I help you, I'm a dead man." "Then we must be clever," Poirot said, his tone calm but unyielding. "The vault holds the truth, Monsieur Faber. A truth that can stop the Raven. Will you let fear win, or will you stand with me?" Faber hesitated, his eyes darting to the bank's entrance. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Come tonight, after hours, I'll get you in. But if we're caught, we will not be caught," Poirot said, his confidence a beacon in the banker's doubt. Hercule Poirot does not fail. That night, under a moonless sky, Poirot returned to the bank. Faber met him at a side entrance, his hand shaking as he unlocked the door. The vault room was a fortress of steel and silence, its walls lined with numbered doors. Vault 17 gleamed under the dim lights, its lock a complex mechanism that demanded precision. Poirot produced a notebook, reciting the codes A7B for X9, X9 A7B 4. Faber's fingers moved over the dials, inputting the sequences with agonizing care. A soft click echoed in the silence, and the vault door swung open, revealing a trove of documents, ledgers, contracts, letters, all bearing the mark of the Raven. But before Poirot could examine them, a shadow moved in the doorway. Faber gasped, and Poirot turned to see a figure in black, a silenced pistol in hand. The sniper from Prague, another of the Raven's agents. Time slowed as Poirot's mind raced, calculating his options. The vault was a trap, and he had walked into it. "Drop the notebook," the figure said, their voice cold and unyielding. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "You assume I am so easily caught, mon ami. But Hercule Poirot is never unprepared." With a flick of his wrist, he tossed a small vial from his Pokita smoke bomb, a precaution he had carried since Vienna. It shattered against the floor, filling the room with choking gray mist. Faber coughed, stumbling back, as Poirot dove for cover behind the vault door. The sniper fired blindly, the shots muffled by the silencer. But Poirot was already moving, dragging Faber toward a maintenance hatch he had spotted earlier. They crawled through the narrow passage, emerging in an alley behind the bank. The documents were still in the vault, but Poirot had memorized their contents in the brief moments he'd had. More importantly, he had the notebook and his life. Faber, trembling but alive, clung to him as they vanished into the Zurich night. The city's lights sparkled like stars as Poirot and Faber found refuge in a safe house Alina had arranged. The banker was shaken but resolute, his fear giving way to determination. Poirot spread the notebook's pages before them, his mind already piecing together the next move. The documents had named the Raven not a person, but a code name for the conspiracy's mastermind, and they had revealed one final clue: a meeting in an alpine village, where the conspirators would gather to finalize their plans. As dawn broke over Zurich, Poirot prepared to leave, his path clear. The Raven was close, their web unraveling with every step he took. Wojciech's death had not been in vain, nor would Faber's courage. The fog of Prague had given way to the clarity of purpose, and Hercule Poirot was ready for the chase to end. Chapter 10. The Vault of Betrayal. The Zurich air was crisp, carrying a faint metallic temps from the Limmat River as Hercule Poirot stepped off the train platform, his polished shoes clicking against the cobblestones. The city's orderly charm, with its clock towers and pristine facades, seemed almost too perfect, a stage set for secrets. His gray eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the bustling Bahnhofstrasse, where bankers in tailored suits moved with purpose, their briefcases swinging like pendulums. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, the weight of the dossier from the Parisian safehouse tucked securely in his overcoat's inner pocket. The documents he'd uncovered in that hidden chateau room had led him here, to a Swiss bank vault that promised to expose the financial arteries of the conspiracy he'd been chasing since that fog-draped night at the London docks. The clue from Prague's scrap of paper slipped to him by the regretful spy before the sniper's bullet silenced her had been maddeningly precise. Zerka Vault 317, Code 4921. The spy's final whisper, the raven's gold, lingered in Poirot's mind, a phrase that tied the conspiracy's funding to a shadowy mastermind. He had no illusions about the danger. The raven, whoever they were, had orchestrated a web of deceit that spanned continents, and Poirot was closing in on its heart. His ally, Dr. Elias Moreau, the archaeologist who'd joined him on the Orient Express, walked beside him, his lanky frame bundled in a wool scarf. Elias's sharp wit and knowledge of ancient codes had proven invaluable, but his nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles betrayed his unease. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his French accent softened by years. "Abroad, this bank is a fortress. If the conspirators have hidden their funds here, they'll have eyes everywhere." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Mon ami, the eyes of others are but mirrors to Hercule Poirot. It is what they do not see, the little gray cells at work, that will undo them." He tapped his temple lightly, his confidence a beacon in the morning chill. The Zerker Cantonal Bank loomed ahead, its neoclassical facade as imposing as a cathedral. Marble columns flanked the entrance, and the heavy bronze doors gleamed under the Swiss sun. Inside, the lobby was a symphony of hushed efficiency. Tellers moved with mechanical precision, and the air smelled faintly of polished wood and ink. Poirot approached the reception desk, his demeanor polished yet unobtrusive, a man who belonged in such a place. "Bonjour, mademoiselle," he said to the clerk, a young woman with severe cheekbones and a starched blouse. "I am expected by Herr Dietrich for an appointment regarding Vault 317. The clerk's eyes flicked over him, assessing. "Your name, Monsieur Henry Duval," Poirot replied smoothly, using the alias he'd adopted for this leg of the journey. The name was a nod to a distant cousin, innocuous enough to avoid suspicion. He produced a forged letter of introduction, its wax seal impeccable, crafted by a contact in Paris. The clerk studied it, then nodded, leading them to a private office. Herr Dietrich, a portly man with a monocle and a penchant for stroking his beard, greeted them with a guarded smile. "Herr Duval, Dr. Moreau, welcome. Vault 317, you say? A most particular request." His tone carried a hint of curiosity, but Poirot noted the slight tightening of his jaw, telltale sign of unease. "Indeed, Herr Dietrich," Poirot said, his voice velvet over steel. "My client, a gentleman of discretion, entrusted me with accessing certain documents. The code, I believe, is 4921. He watched Dietrich's reaction closely, noting the flicker of surprise in the banker's eyes. Dietrich adjusted his monocle. "Very well, follow me." He led them through a labyrinth of corridors, past armed guards and steel gates, to an elevator that descended with a low hum into the bank's sublevels. The air grew cooler, the walls lined with numbered vaults like silent sentinels. At Vault 317, Dietrich input the code, and the heavy door swung open with a pneumatic hiss. The vault was a small chamber, its walls lined with safety deposit boxes. A single steel table stood at the center, illuminated by a stark overhead light. Dietrich gestured to a box, marked with a discreet raven emblem. "This is what you seek, I presume." His tone was neutral, but Poirot sensed a test precisement. Poirot replied, stepping forward. He inserted a key from the Prague clue into the box's lock, turning it with a satisfying click. Inside lay a leather portfolio, its edges worn but its contents pristine: ledgers, bank drafts, and encrypted correspondence. Poirot's pulse quickened as he scanned the documents, recognizing names from the dossier. European financiers, minor royals, and shadowy operatives, all linked by a trail of untraceable funds. This was the conspiracy's lifeblood, the gold that fueled the Raven's schemes. Elias leaned over, his spectacles glinting. These transfers, they're routed through shell companies in Geneva, Lisbon, even Buenos Aires. Millions. Poirot. Enough to destabilize governments. Before Poirot could respond, a sharp click echoed behind them. He turned to see Dietrich, standing at the vault's entrance, a sleek pistol in his hand. The banker's genial facade had vanished, replaced by a cold smirk. "I'm afraid, Herr Duval, that your curiosity has gone too far. The Raven pays well to ensure privacy." Poirot's heart sank, not from fear, but from the sting of betrayal. He had suspected Dietrich's complicity, but had hoped to avoid confrontation. "Herr Dietrich," he said calmly, "you mistake me for a man who comes unprepared. The little gray cells, they anticipate such indiscretions." Dietrich's smirk faltered. "You're alone, in a vault, with no way out. What can you do?" Poirot's eyes flicked to Elias, who stood frozen, his face pale. "Elias, mon ami, the portfolio, if you please." As Elias hesitated, Poirot's voice sharpened. "Now, Elias," grabbed the portfolio, but Dietrich raised the pistol. "Drop it, or I shoot." In that moment, Poirot's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, possibilities. He stepped forward, hands raised, his voice soothing. "Herr Dietrich, consider the consequences. A gunshot in this vault will echo through the bank. Guards will come. Questions will be asked. And the Raven, I assure you, does not reward those who draw attention." Dietrich's hand trembled. But before he could respond, Elias acted. With a sudden lunge, he hurled the portfolio at Dietrich, knocking the pistol aside. The banker stumbled, and Poirot seized the moment, grabbing a heavy ledger from the table and swinging it at Dietrich's head. The man collapsed, unconscious, the pistol clattering to the floor. "Bravo, Elias!" Poirot exclaimed, retrieving the portfolio. "But we must move quickly. The vault is no place for lingering." Elias, breathing heavily, nodded. "The door, can we open it?" Poirot examined the vault's mechanism, a complex array of gears and locks. The code panel was locked, and Dietrich's keyring was useless without the master sequence. "Murd," Poirot muttered, a rare lapse into frustration. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on a narrow grill near the ceiling, a ventilation shaft, barely wide enough for a man. "Elias, the shaft," Poirot said, pointing. "It is our only exit." Elias blanched. "You're joking. It's too small." "Nonsense," Poirot replied, already shrugging off his overcoat. "The body is but a vessel for the mind, and the mind of Hercule Poirot does not accept defeat." He climbed onto the table, his movements precise, despite his compact frame, and pried the grill loose with a letter opener from his pocket. The shaft was dark, its metal walls cold and slick, but Poirot's determination was unyielding. "Follow me, Elias," he said, squeezing into the shaft. The metal pressed against his shoulders, the air stale and heavy. He crawled forward, inch by inch, his knees scraping against the rivets. Behind him, Elias muttered a stream of French curses, his claustrophobia evident. The shaft twisted upward, then leveled out, leading to a faint glow, a maintenance hatch. After what felt like an eternity, Poirot reached the hatch, pushing it open to reveal a dimly lit service corridor. He emerged, dusting off his suit, and helped Elias through. "Voila," he said, his mustache curling with satisfaction. The little gray cells triumphed once more. But their relief was short-lived. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, accompanied by the sharp bark of orders in German. Guards, alerted by Dietrich's absence, or perhaps a silent alarm. Poirot grabbed Elias's arm, pulling him toward a stairwell. "We must reach the street. The portfolio is our proof, and we cannot lose it." They descended the stairs, dodging a patrol by ducking into a janitor's closet. Poirot's heart pounded, but his mind remained clear. He rifled through the closet, finding a maintenance uniform. "Put this on," he told Elias. "We shall walk out as workers. not fugitives. Disguised, they slipped into the lobby, blending with the morning crowd. Poirot's calm demeanor masked his racing thoughts. The portfolio, tucked under Ilias's arm, was their prize, but Zurich was no longer safe. As they stepped into the sunlight, Poirot's eyes caught a familiar figure across the street, a woman in a sapphire scarf, her face half hidden. The woman from the Istanbul ball, the locket's owner. She vanished into an alley before he could pursue. Elias, Poirot said, his voice low. We are not alone. The Raven's eyes are upon us. They hailed a taxi. Heading for a safe house, Elias had arranged through his academic contacts a modest apartment in Zurich's old town. There, Poirot spread the portfolio's contents across a table, deciphering the encrypted correspondence with a pencil and notepad. The documents confirmed his suspicions. The conspiracy was funded through a network of anonymous accounts, with millions funneled to operatives across Europe. One name stood out, scrawled in a hurried hand. The Raven. Elias paced, his nerves fraying. Poirot, this is bigger than we thought. If the Raven knows we have this, they'll hunt us. Indeed, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. But the hunter does not always see the trap. He paused, his fingers tracing a line in the ledger. There is a pattern here, Elias. The Raven's funds flow through a single account in Geneva. If we can trace it, we find the mastermind. A knock at the door startled them. Poirot signaled for silence. Drawing a small pistol from his vest, a precaution he'd taken since Paris, he approached the door, peering through the peephole. It was their contact, a wiry Swiss professor named Clara Vogel, who'd arranged the safe house. But something was off. Her hands trembled, and her eyes darted nervously. Poirot opened the door, his pistol concealed. Mademoiselle Vogel, you are most welcome, but you seem perturbed. Clara stepped inside, her face pale. Monsieur Poirot, I had no choice. Before he could react, she pulled a syringe from her coat, lunging at him. Poirot sidestepped, grabbing her wrist and twisting until the syringe clattered to the floor. Elias tackled her, pinning her against the wall. Clara, why? Elias demanded, his voice cracking. Tears streamed down her face. They have my brother, the Raven. They said they'd kill him if I didn't betray you. Poirot's expression softened, but his grip on her wrist remained firm. Mademoiselle, you have been ensnared by a cruel master. But tell me, who is the Raven? Clara sobbed, shaking her head. I don't know their face, only a voice, a woman's voice, cold as ice. She said you'd die in the vault, but you escaped. She's coming for you now. Poirot released her, his mind racing. A woman, the sapphire-clad figure from Istanbul, perhaps. He knelt beside Clara, his voice gentle but commanding. Mademoiselle, you will help us. Tell me everything, every word, every detail. Under Poirot's relentless questioning, Clara revealed fragments, coded messages delivered by courier, a meeting planned in an alpine village, and a code named the Raven. Poirot memorized every detail, his little gray cells weaving a tapestry of clues. He turned to Elias, who still held the portfolio tightly. We must move, mon ami. The Raven is close, and we are not yet beyond their reach. They left Clara bound but unharmed, with a promise to protect her brother if she cooperated. As they slipped into the Zurich night, Poirot's mind churned. The Raven was a woman, a mastermind who'd outwitted him thus far. But the documents, the Alpine lead, and his own unyielding resolve were closing the gap. The chase was far from over, but Poirot felt the thrill of the hunt, the certainty that truth would prevail. As the taxi sped toward the station, Poirot glanced at Elias, his Elias face etched with determination. To the Alps, Elias, he said, his voice steady. There, we shall find the Raven's nest. The city lights blurred past, and Poirot's thoughts turned to the snow-covered peaks ahead, where the next chapter of this deadly game awaited. Chapter 11. The Alpine Pursuit. The Alpine village of Schattenberg lay cradled in a valley where snow-draped peaks pierced the heavens, their jagged silhouettes stark against a sky of bruised violet. Hercule Poirot, bundled in a woolen overcoat and a scarf of muted burgundy, stood at the edge of the village square, his breath misting in the frigid air. The brass key from the Iron Duke's shadow rested in his pocket, a talisman of the chase that had led him from London's fog to this remote Swiss outpost. His quarry, the elusive mastermind, known only as the Raven, was close. He could feel it in the prickle of his instincts, honed by years of unraveling the tangled threads of human deceit. The trail had grown colder in Zurich, where escape from the bank vault had yielded the name, the Raven, but little else. Yet, a cryptic note tucked within the vault's documents had pointed to Tonberg, whispering of a clandestine meeting in a lodge nestled high in the Alps. The note spoke of a plot to sabotage a peace conference in Geneva, a gathering of diplomats poised to forge fragile alliances in a Europe still scarred by war. The Raven, it seemed, thrived on chaos, and Poirot was determined to stop them before their machinations bore fruit. The village was a postcard of rustic charm, chalets with steeply pitched roofs, their eaves dripping with icicles, and a stone fountain frozen mid-splash in the square. But beneath the serene facade, tension simmered. Locals cast wary glances at strangers, and the innkeeper at the Gasthaus, Zum Adler, had hesitated before confirming a rumor of a shadowy gathering in the mountains. Poirot, ever the observer, noted the innkeeper's trembling hands and the way his eyes darted toward a faded photograph of a young man in a military uniform, perhaps a son lost to conflict, a motive for fear or complicity. Mon ami Poirot murmured to himself, adjusting his hat against the biting wind. The truth hides in the silences as much as in the words. His destination was the Schwarzer Adler Lodge, a remote retreat perched on a ridge 2 hours' climb from the village. The lodge was accessible only by a narrow path that wound through pine forests and past sheer cliffs, a journey as perilous as the mystery itself. Poirot secured a guide, a wiry mountaineer named Hans Kessel, whose weathered face and laconic demeanor suggested a man accustomed to the mountain's secrets. Hans carried a rucksack and a coiled rope, his boots crunching on the snow as they began their ascent. The path was treacherous, slick with ice and flanked by drops that plunged into misty abysses. Poirot, despite his urban polish, moved with surprising agility, his cane more a tool for balance than a crutch. "You climb well for a city man," Hans remarked, his German accent thick as he glanced back at Poirot. "Merci," Poirot replied, his tone dry. "The little gray cells, they guide the feet as well as the mind. Tell me, Herr Kessel, what do you know of this lodge?" Hans shrugged, his eyes scanning the path. "Rich folks go there. Secret meetings, they say. No one from the village is welcome unless they're serving drinks or carrying firewood. Strange noises at night, machinery maybe." Poirot's mustache twitched. Machinery in a remote lodge. The detail was a spark in the tinder of his mind. "And these rich folk," he pressed, "do they have a leader? A raven, perhaps?" Hans stopped abruptly, his gaze sharp. "You ask dangerous questions, Herr Poirot. Up here, the wind carries words too far." Poirot nodded, undeterred. "Then let us climb in silence, mon ami, and let the mountain speak." The Schwarzer Adler Lodge emerged from the snow like a fortress from a fairy tale, its timber-bird walls and steeply gabled roof dwarfed by the surrounding peaks. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, and the faint glow of lanterns flickered through frosted windows. Poirot and Hans crouched behind a snow-covered boulder, observing the lodge from a distance. 2 men in heavy coats stood guard at the entrance, their rifles glinting in the moonlight. A third figure, cloaked and hooded, slipped out a side door and vanished into the forest. "The Raven," Hans whispered. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing. "Or a decoy. We must be certain." He instructed Hans to wait, then crept closer, his movements silent despite the crunch of snow. The guards were distracted, arguing over a flask, and Poirot slipped behind a woodpile near a basement window. Peering through the glass, he glimpsed a cavernous room lit by oil lamps. A group of figures huddled around a table, their voices muffled but urgent. On the table lay a crate marked with a symbol, a black raven clutching a dagger. Inside, He caught the glint of metal, cylindrical objects, possibly explosives. Poirot's heart quickened. Sabotage. Indeed, the peace conference was in peril, and these were the tools of destruction. He needed to get inside, but the window was locked, and the guards were returning to their posts. Thinking quickly, he retrieved a small vial from his coat, a concoction of his own design, a mild sedative distilled from herbs. He poured it into the snow near the guard's flask, trusting the wind to carry the faint vapor. Minutes later, the guards slumped, their rifles clattering to the ground. "Poirot," signaled Hans, who joined him with a skeptical grunt. "You're a strange one, Herr Poirot." "Eccentricity is my weapon," Poirot replied, prying open the basement window with his cane's hidden blade. They slipped inside, landing softly on a stone floor. The basement was a warren of crates and machinery, the air heavy with the scent of oil and gunpowder. Poirot's eyes darted over the equipment: wires, timers, and canisters labeled in German Sprengstoff, explosives, enough to level a building. A blueprint on a workbench showed the layout of the Geneva conference hall, with red marks indicating structural weak points. Monsieur Poirot whispered, "This is no mere sabotage. This is a declaration of war." Hans, less composed, muttered a curse. "We should leave, Herr Poirot. This is too big for us." "Nan," Poirot said firmly, "the little gray cells, they do not retreat. We disable the explosives, and we find the Raven." They set to work, Poirot's nimble fingers tracing wires to their sources. He had studied sabotage techniques during his time with the Belgian police, and his knowledge proved vital. With Hans's help, he disconnected the timers, rendering the explosives inert. But as they worked, a shadow fell across the room, a figure in a black cloak, the same hooded silhouette Poirot had seen outside. "You meddle in affairs beyond your ken, detective," the figure said, their voice a low rasp, tinged with an accent Poirot couldn't place. A pistol gleamed in their hand. Poirot raised his hands, his expression calm. "And you, mon ami, presume to outwit Hercule Poirot. A bold choice, but unwise." The figure laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "You're alone, far from your precious London. No one will find you here." Hans lunged, but the figure fired, the shot grazing his shoulder. Poirot seized the moment, hurling a canister at the figure's head. It struck true, and the figure staggered, the pistol clattering to the floor. Poirot dove for it, but the figure recovered, kicking the weapon into the shadows and fleeing up a staircase. After them, Poirot shouted, ignoring Hans's protests. The mountaineer, clutching his wound, followed as Poirot raced up the stairs into the lodge's main hall. The hall was a vision of opulence, chandeliers of antler and crystal, walls lined with tapestries depicting alpine hunts. The conspirators had fled, leaving papers scattered across a long table. Poirot scanned them: letters, maps, and a list of names, some familiar from the peace conference. The Raven's reach was vast, but their identity remained a cipher. Outside, a blizzard had begun, the wind howling like a chorus of wolves. Poirot and Hans braved the storm, following tracks that led to a cliffside path. The Raven's cloak was a fleeting shadow against the snow, darting between pines. Poirot's heart pounded, not from exertion but from the thrill of the chase. He was close, so close, to unmasking the mastermind. The path narrowed, the cliff dropping away to a chasm below. The Raven paused at a rope bridge swaying in the wind, their hood falling back to reveal a glimpse of dark hair and a sharp profile. Poirot shouted, "Surrender, mon ami. The game is over." The Raven turned, their face obscured by the storm. "The game is never over, Poirot," they called, their voice carried by the wind. With a swift motion, they cut the bridge's ropes, sending it plummeting into the abyss. The Raven vanished into the blizzard, their laughter echoing. Poirot cursed under his breath, a rare lapse in his composure. Hans, pale from his wound, grabbed his arm. "We must go back, Herr Poirot. The storm will kill us." Reluctantly, Poirot nodded. The Raven had escaped, but the explosives were neutralized, and the peace conference was safe for now. They retraced their steps to the lodge, where Poirot gathered the scattered papers, tucking them into his coat. The answers were there. He was certain, waiting for his little gray cells to unravel them. Back in Schattenberg, Hans's wound was treated at the village doctor's, and Poirot sat by a fire in the Gasthaus zum Adler, studying the papers. One document stood out, a letter addressed to a London official, hinting at a meeting at a coastal manor. The Raven's trail led back to England, and Poirot's resolve hardened. The chase was far from over. As the storm raged outside, Poirot sipped a mug of mulled wine, his mind already plotting the next move. The peace conference was secure, and the lodge's secrets were his. The Raven had slipped through his fingers, but Hercule Poirot was not a man to be outwitted twice. The Alpine pursuit had ended, but the greater game was just beginning. Chapter 12. The London Connection. The rain-slicked streets of London shimmered under the gaslights as Hercule Poirot stepped off the train at Victoria Station, the weight of his journey across Europe settling into his bones. The Orient Express, the Grand Bazaar, the Viennese estate, the foggy alleys of Prague had led him back to this city, where the air was thick with coal smoke and secrets. In his pocket, the crescent moon key and a memorized list of conspirators burned like embers, urging him toward the final act of this intricate drama. The clue from Zurika, whispered mention of a meeting at a coastal manor, had brought him here, to the heart of the empire, where the threads of the conspiracy converged. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache impeccably waxed despite the damp chill, and hailed the hansom cab. "To the Athenaeum Club, if you please," he instructed the driver, his voice crisp. The cab rattled through the city, past fog-wreathed lampposts and the silhouettes of hurried pedestrians. Poirot's mind was a whirl of calculations. The list from the satchel, with Countess Irina Volskaya's name marked by an asterisk, pointed to a high-ranking official as the linchpin of the conspiracy. The Raven, the shadowy mastermind, remained elusive, but the coastal manor was the stage for the next revelation. First, he needed to confirm the official's identity, and the Athenaeum, that bastion of elite discourse, was the place to start. The Athenaeum Club loomed on Pall Mall, its neoclassical facade a monument to power and privilege. Poirot stepped into the grand foyer, where marble columns and chandeliers cast a golden glow over men in tailcoats, murmuring about politics and commerce. He presented his card to the porter, who raised an eyebrow but admitted him with a nod. Poirot's reputation as a detective of unparalleled discretion had its uses. Even among London's elite. Inside, the air was heavy with cigar smoke and the clink of brandy glasses. Poirot scanned the room, his gray eyes sharp. He recognized several faces from the society pages, a cabinet minister, a retired general, a newspaper magnate, but his attention fixed on a man in a corner alcove, Sir Reginald Harcourt, a senior official in the Foreign Office. Harcourt's patrician features were taut, his fingers drumming on a leather-bound ledger. Beside him sat a younger man, lean and hawkish, with a scar tracing his jaw, likely a secretary or aide. Their conversation was low, urgent, punctuated by glances toward the door. Poirot took a seat nearby, ordering a tisane from a passing waiter. He opened the newspaper, feigning interest in the headlines while his ears strained to catch their words. The din of the club made it difficult, but fragments emerged. The manor. Midnight. The Raven's orders. Poirot's pulse quickened. The Raven. The name was a specter, haunting every step of his chase. He needed something tangible to tie Harcourt to the conspiracy. As the evening wore on, Poirot noticed a pattern. Harcourt's aide, whom he overheard addressed as Mr. Langley, frequently excused himself, slipping into a side corridor. Curiosity piqued. Poirot followed at a discreet distance, his polished shoes silent on the carpet. The corridor led to a private reading room, its door slightly ajar. Through the gap, Poirot glimpsed Langley handing a folded paper to a waiter, not a club servant, but a man whose sharp eyes and calloused hands suggested a rougher trade. The waiter tucked the paper into his waistcoat and vanished through a service door. Poirot's mind raced. A coded message, no doubt, meant for the manor meeting. He needed to intercept it without arousing suspicion. Returning to the main room, he approached a bar where the waiter was now polishing glasses with studied nonchalance. "Pardon, monsieur," Poirot said, his accent deliberately pronounced. "I seem to have misplaced my pen. Might you have seen it near the reading room?" The waiter's eyes flickered, but he shook his head. "No, sir. Haven't been there tonight." "Curio," Poirot murmured, smiling. "I could have sworn I saw you there. No matter." He turned away, but not before noting the waiter's hand slip to his waistcoat, checking the papers. Security. The seed of doubt was planted. Poirot returned to his seat, his mind charting a plan. He needed an ally, someone with access to the club's inner workings. His thoughts turned to Dr. Julian Harrow, the archaeologist who had proven resourceful on the Orient Express. Harrow had returned to London days earlier, promising to assist if needed. Poirot scribbled a note and entrusted it to a trusted porter, requesting Harrow's presence at a nearby cafe the next morning. The following day, Poirot met Harrow at the Café Royal, its mirrored walls reflecting the morning light. Harrow, dressed in a tweed suit that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, greeted him with a grin. "Poirot, you old fox. What's the game now?" Poirot sipped his espresso, his eyes gleaming. "The game, mon ami, is one of shadows and whispers. I need your eyes in a place where mine cannot go. The Athonium Club. There is a waiter, a man with a paper, that holds the key to our next move." Harrow leaned forward, intrigued. "You think he's carrying for the Raven?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or for someone closer to the heart of this conspiracy. Sir Reginald Harcourt is involved, and a meeting at a coastal manor is imminent. I must know what that paper says." Harrow nodded, his adventurer's spirit alight. "I've got a friend at the club, a junior member. I can get in as his guest." "What's the plan?" Poirot outlined a strategy. Harrow would pose as a distracted scholar, spilling a drink near the waiter to create a diversion. In the chaos, he would attempt to glimpse or retrieve the paper. "But be cautious, Monsieur Harrow," Poirot warned. "These are not amateurs. The Raven's reach is long." That evening, Poirot positioned himself in a shadowed alcove outside the club, a vantage point from which he could observe the service entrance. Harrow, true to his word, entered as a guest, his boisterous laugh echoing through the foyer. Inside, the plan unfolded. Harrow, feigning clumsiness, knocked a glass of claret onto the waiter's tray, sending napkins and cutlery flying. As the waiter scrambled to clean up, Harrow's nimble fingers brushed the waistcoat, extracting the paper with the skill of a seasoned pickpocket. He slipped out minutes later, meeting Poirot in a nearby alley. The paper was a single sheet, written in a cipher Poirot recognized from the dockside tavern. "Monsieur," he murmured, deciphering it swiftly. The message was brief. "Manor at Cliff's End, midnight, Friday. Raven, overseas. Bring treaty." "The treaty," Poirot said, his voice low. "The same treaty from Istanbul. This is the moment, Monsieur Harrow, when the conspiracy shows its face." Harrow's eyes narrowed. "Cliff's End is near Dover. Remote, easy to defend. Sounds like a trap." We, Poirot agreed, but also an opportunity. We must be there, unseen, to hear what is said. The next 2 days were a flurry of preparation. Poirot enlisted the aid of Inspector Japp, his old friend from Scotland Yard, though he revealed only enough to secure discreet assistance. Japp provided a map of the manor's grounds and a promise to have constables nearby, should trouble arise. Poirot also contacted Miss Clara Beaumont, the heiress from the Orient Express, who had returned to London and owed him a debt for recovering. Her brooch, her wealth and connections secured a hired car and a set of false credentials for Poirot and Harrow to pose as surveyors inspecting the manor's estate. On Friday, as dusk painted the sky in hues of violet and gold, Poirot and Harrow drove to Cliff's End, a sprawling Georgian manor perched on a windswept bluff overlooking the channel. The sea roared below, and gulls wheeled overhead, their cries mingling with the wind. The manor's windows glowed with lamplight, and shadowy figures moved within. Poirot parked the car behind a copse of elms, concealing it from view. Surveyors, Poirot said, adjusting his cap. "Hope you're as good with a theodolite as you are with a cipher." Poirot's mustache twitched. "The theodolite, mon ami, is merely a prop. The true instrument is here." He tapped his temple. They approached the manor, on foot, carrying a surveyor's kit for cover. The grounds were patrolled by two men in dark coats, their faces obscured by scarves. Poirot and Harrow crouched behind a stone wall, waiting for the guards to pass. The air was sharp with salt and tension. When the coast was clear, they slipped into the manor's garden, where a trellis of ivy provided access to a second-story balcony. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of oak-paneled corridors and flickering sconces. Poirot's senses were on high alert, his ears attuned to every creak and whisper. They descended to the main hall, where a heavy oak door led to a library. Voices drifted from within, low and urgent. Poirot pressed his ear to the door, catching fragments of a conversation. "The treaty must be delivered to the Raven," said a voice, clipped and authoritative. "Harcourt's. The conference cannot proceed without it." Another voice, smooth and feminine, replied, "And the payment." "The Raven demands assurance." Poirot's breath caught. The woman's voice was familiar, its cadence echoing the Countess from the Orient Express. He signaled to Harrow, who nodded, his hand on a small knife tucked in his belt. They needed to see the speakers without being seen. Poirot spotted a dumbwaiter in the corridor, its shaft likely leading to the library. With Harrow's help, he pried open the hatch, revealing a cramped space, barely large enough for one. I am not so young as I once was," Poirot muttered, squeezing inside. Harrow gave a suppressed chuckle, closing the hatch behind him. The dumbwaiter creaked as it descended, depositing Poirot in a narrow service alcove behind the library's bookshelves. Through a gap in the shelves, he saw Harcourt standing by a fireplace, his face flushed with agitation. Across from him was Countess Volskaya, her claret gown replaced by a severe black dress, her auburn hair pinned tightly. A third figure, cloaked and hooded, stood in the shadows. "The Raven," Poirot presumed. "The treaty is secure," Harcourt said, producing a leather portfolio. But the diplomat grows suspicious. "He's doubled his security." The Countess's lips curved. "Let him. The Raven has planned for every contingency." The hooded figure spoke, their voice a low rasp distorted by a mask. "The diplomat is irrelevant. The treaty will shift the balance. Delivered to the contact in Brussels by Sunday." Poirot's mind raced. The treaty, stolen in fragments from Istanbul, was the key to a plot to disrupt a peace conference. But the Raven's identity remained hidden, their voice unrecognizable. He needed to act before the treaty left the manor. A sudden noise, a chair scraping, made Poirot freeze. The Countess's head turned, her eyes narrowing. "Someone's here," she hissed. Poirot held his breath, his fingers brushing the crescent moon key. The dumbwaiter was too slow for escape. He needed a diversion. Outside, Harrow, sensing the tension, acted. He knocked over a garden urn, the crash echoing through the manor. The Countess and Harcourt rushed to the window, giving Poirot a chance to slip from the alcove and back into the corridor. He rejoined Harrow in the garden, his heart pounding. "The treaty is here," he whispered. "We must stop it from leaving." Harrow's eyes gleamed. "I saw a motorbike in the stables. We could cut them off at the gate." Poirot hesitated, then nodded. Speed was their ally. They crept to the stables, where a gleaming Norton motorcycle stood. Harrow, grinning, swung onto the seat. "Ever ridden one of these, Poirot?" "Nan," Poirot said, climbing behind him with a grimace. "But for justice, I will endure." The motorcycle roared to life, tearing through the manor's drive. As headlights appeared behind them, a car, likely carrying the treaty, sped toward the gate. Harrow pushed the bike to its limit, the wind whipping Poirot's coat. They reached the gate first, skidding to a stop and blocking the path. Harcourt's car screeched to a halt, and he emerged, furious. "Who are you?" he demanded. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Hercule Poirot, and this ends now. The treaty, Sir Reginald. Hand it over." The Countess appeared, a pistol in her hand. "You're meddling in affairs beyond your understanding, monsieur." Before she could act, A whistle pierced the Nightjap's constables. Summoned by Poirot's foresight, swarmed the gate. The Countess lowered her weapon, her face pale. Harcourt, realizing the game was up, tossed the portfolio to the ground. The raven, however, was gone, vanished into the night. Poirot retrieved the portfolio, its contents intact. "The treaty is safe," he said, "but the raven eludes us still." Harrow clapped him on the shoulder. "You've got the nose of a bloodhound, Poirot. What's next?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "To the manor at Cliff's End, mon ami. The raven may have fled, but their shadow lingers." As the constables secured Harcourt and the Countess, Poirot gazed toward the sea. The horizon swallowed by darkness. The treaty was safe, the conspiracy exposed, but the raven's true identity remained a riddle. The coastal manor held the final clue, and Poirot was ready to face it.